Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the golden healer who restored Universe 6. After the Tournament of Power, Naruto x Caulifla x Kale, Dragon Ball Super. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Golden Genesis. Darkness. Infinite and absolute. Naruto Uzumaki floated through nothingness, his body weightless yet heavy with the disorientation of complete sensory deprivation. The last thing he remembered was standing atop the Hokage monument, watching dawn break over Konoha when a strange ripple had torn through reality itself. The dimensional fracture had appeared without warning, a vertical slit in the fabric of existence that had pulled him in before he could even summon a shadow clone. Now there was nothing. Hello. His voice produced no echo, seeming to travel nowhere yet everywhere simultaneously. The absence of sound, of air resistance, of anything tangible sent a momentary spike of panic through him that he quickly suppressed. I've faced worse than this. Much worse. 25 years of life as a shinobi had taught him that panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. He closed his eyes, not that it made any difference in this void, and focused inward. Reaching for that familiar warmth at his core. Kurama, he called mentally to the Nine Tails. I'm here, Kit. The fox's rumbling voice brought immediate comfort. Though, here, seems to be a rather flexible concept at the moment. Any idea where we are? None. This place exists outside any reality I've ever sensed. There's no chakra, no natural energy, nothing. To draw from except what we brought with us. Naruto concentrated, feeling his chakra network pulsing strongly despite the void around them. Something felt different, though, his energy responded with unusual fluidity. As if the normal constraints of his body had somehow loosened. Let's try something, he muttered, forming a familiar hand seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Energy surged from his core, but instead of creating duplicates, his chakra spilled outward in golden streams that illuminated the darkness. The radiance revealed absolutely nothing. Just endless black emptiness stretching in all directions. Naruto frowned. That's not right. Your chakra is behaving strangely, Kurama observed. The void is interacting with it, altering its properties. Then let's try something else. Naruto closed his eyes again, this time attempting to form a simple Rasengan. The chakra gathered in his palm, spinning and condensing, but rather than maintaining its usual spherical shape, it expanded outward in pulsing waves. Golden light spread in all directions, illuminating nothing yet somehow pushing back against the nothingness itself. Whoa! Naruto breathed as he felt something new. Where his chakra touched the void, tiny motes of something began to form, like dust particles catching sunlight. The more chakra he channeled, the more these particles appeared, gradually coalescing into larger structures. Naruto. Kurama's voice held rare astonishment. You're creating matter from pure chakra. That's impossible. Apparently not. This void seems to have different rules. Your chakra is providing both energy and template for physical creation. Experimentally, Naruto pushed more chakra outward while focusing on a specific thought. Ground beneath my feet. The golden energy responded immediately, spinning and condensing into a solid platform roughly 10 meters across. Hesitantly, he lowered himself until his feet touched the surface, solid, smooth, and real. He couldn't find words to describe the sensation. It wasn't just manipulating existing elements as he'd done countless times before. This was creation from absolute nothingness. Be careful, Kurama cautioned. We don't know the limitations or consequences of this power here. Naruto nodded, though the warning came against a rising tide of excitement. If he could create solid matter, perhaps he could build something more substantial, a true foothold in this emptiness. Channeling more chakra, he focused on expanding the platform, visualizing details with increasing precision. The golden energy responded eagerly, almost hungrily, pulling more chakra than he'd intended. The platform expanded rapidly, developing texture and variation, smooth in some places, rocky in others. When he thought of grass, slender green blades sprouted instantly from the newly formed soil. A casual thought about water created a small pond that somehow remained contained despite the apparent lack of gravity in the surrounding void. This is incredible, Naruto murmured, watching trees rise from the earth at his merest thought, their branches spreading and sprouting leaves that rustled in a wind he'd unconsciously created. Almost too easy. Indeed, Kurama agreed, his tone cautious. Your chakra expenditure is significant, but nowhere near what such creation should require. Something about this place is amplifying your abilities. Naruto continued expanding his creation, forming a roughly circular island about 200 meters across, a miniature world floating in the cosmic void. He created variations in terrain, small hills and valleys, streams feeding into the central pond, and various vegetation. The effort left him breathing heavily, but more from concentration than chakra depletion. With a habitable space established, Naruto sat cross-legged at the center of his creation and closed his eyes, extending his senses outward. If this was truly some kind of void between dimensions, perhaps he could find a way home by locating familiar energy signatures. At first, he sensed nothing beyond his small island, just the endless emptiness. But as he pushed his awareness further, something flickered at the very edge of his perception. Two faint energy signatures, utterly unfamiliar yet undeniably alive. There's someone else here, he said, rising to his feet. Two someones, actually. Be cautious, Kurama warned. We don't know what else might inhabit this place. Naruto nodded, but couldn't ignore the signatures. If others were trapped here, he couldn't leave them to drift endlessly in the void. Focusing on the direction of the energies, he channeled his chakra into a golden beam that stretched out from his island, forming a narrow bridge reaching into the darkness. As the bridge extended, he began to make out what appeared to be a small pocket of distorted space, a bubble of reality different from both his island and the surrounding void. Within it, he could sense movement and growing agitation as his bridge approached. Suddenly, the bubble burst open from within, and two figures shot out with incredible speed, heading straight for him. Naruto barely had time to raise his arms in defense before the first figure crashed into him with bone-jarring force, sending him skidding backward across his created terrain. Years of combat instinct took over as he flipped in mid-slide, landing in a crouch with kunai already drawn. Who the hell are you, and what is this place? Demanded a harsh female voice. Standing before him was a young woman with wild, spiky black hair and fierce eyes. She wore unusual clothing, baggy purple pants and a pink crop top that revealed well-defined abdominal muscles. Her stance was unmistakably that of an experienced fighter, balanced perfectly between offense and defense. Behind her stood another young woman, taller with a more slender build and long black hair. Her expression showed anxiety rather than aggression, but Naruto sensed tremendous power contained within her seemingly gentle frame. I asked you a question. The first woman snapped, her hands glowing with an energy Naruto didn't recognize. Start talking before I blast you into whatever hell this is. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he replied calmly, straightening but keeping his guard up. I'm not sure what this place is either. I was pulled here through some kind of dimensional rift. The woman's eyes narrowed suspiciously. And I'm supposed to believe you just happened to create this, she gestured at the island around them. Floating piece of real estate in the middle of nothingness. I just discovered I could do it, Naruto explained, gradually lowering his kunai. My chakra interacts strangely with this void. I sensed your energy signatures and came to investigate. Chakra. The second woman spoke for the first time, her voice surprisingly soft compared to her companions. Is that different from ki? Before Naruto could answer, the first woman stepped forward, energy still crackling around her fists. I don't care what you call it. What I want to know is if you're responsible for bringing us here after our universe was erased. Your universe was what? Naruto blinked in confusion. Look, I don't know anything about universe erasure. I'm from a place called Konohagakure in the Land of Fire. I was standing on the Hokage monument when a tear in space pulled me in. The aggressive woman studied him intently, clearly weighing his words. After a tense moment, she allowed the energy around her hands to dissipate slightly. I'm Caulifla, she finally said. That's Kale. We're Saiyans from Universe 6, or what was Universe 6 until Zeno erased it during the Tournament of Power. Tournament of Power. Zeno. Universe 6. Naruto shook his head. None of that means anything to me. Caulifla and Kale exchanged glances. He really doesn't know, sis, Kale said quietly. Doesn't mean he's not involved, Caulifla countered. Then turned back to Naruto. Our universe was completely destroyed. We were fighting in a tournament between universes, and ours lost. Everything was erased from existence, including us, supposedly. But instead of oblivion, we found ourselves trapped in that pocket dimension you broke open. Naruto absorbed this information, trying to make sense of it. Multiple universes. Complete erasure. The scale was difficult to comprehend, even for someone who had faced world-ending threats. So how did you create all this? Kale asked, gesturing to the island around them. Are you some kind of god? Naruto laughed, the sound strangely comforting in the eerie surroundings. Definitely not. I'm just a shinobi, a ninja from my world. Though I am the Hokage, the leader of my village. A ninja. Caulifla raised an eyebrow skeptically. You don't look like much. Despite the situation, Naruto felt a familiar competitive spark. He'd spent his life being underestimated, while he'd long ago stopped needing to prove himself. Something about Caulifla's dismissive tone triggered an old reflex. With a half smile, he formed a single seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. This time, instead of dissolving into the void, his chakra responded correctly. 50 perfect duplicates of Naruto appeared in a circular formation around the three of them, each solid and distinct. Both women tensed immediately, Caulifla dropping into a fighting stance while Kale's eyes widened in alarm. Relax, Naruto said, dispelling the clones with a wave. Just demonstrating that I'm not completely useless. Though I'm still figuring out how my abilities work here. Multiple forms technique, Caulifla muttered, slightly impressed despite herself. Not bad. Can you fight with them, or are they just for show? Each clone is a fully functional copy with its own consciousness and abilities, Naruto explained. It's one of my specialties. Caulifla seemed about to respond when something FTED in the darkness beyond the island's edge. All three warriors sensed it simultaneously, turning toward the disturbance. Something's coming, Kale whispered, her voice trembling slightly. It beyond the island's boundaries rippled like dark water, and amorphous shapes began to coalesce, shadowy forms with no definite structure yet somehow giving the impression of hunger and malevolence. What are those things? Naruto asked, already drawing on Kurama's chakra as golden energy began to flow across his skin. No idea, Caulifla replied, her own hands flaring with bluish energy. But they definitely don't feel friendly. As if responding to her assessment, the nearest shadow entity surged forward, crossing the boundary onto the island. Where it touched, vegetation withered instantly, turning gray and dissolving into dust. They're consuming the matter I created, Naruto realized. Feeding on it somehow. 3 more shadow entities approached from different directions, moving with increasing purpose. Kale, stay close to me, Caulifla ordered, her body beginning to glow with intensifying power. If these things want a fight, we'll give them one. Without waiting for the others, she launched herself at the nearest entity, her fist blazing with energy as she drove it directly into the amorphous mass. The impact created a shockwave that rippled across the island, but the shadow merely distorted around her attack before reforming. Physical attacks passed through them. She called out, dodging backward as the entity reached for her with elongating tendrils. Naruto quickly assessed the situation. If these things consume matter, maybe energy affects them differently. Kurama, let's try this, he muttered, forming a familiar spiraling sphere in his palm. But rather than the standard Rasengan, he infused it with nature energy, creating a sage-enhanced version that glowed with an intense golden light. As one of the shadow entities lunged toward him, Naruto met it directly, driving the Rasengan into its center. Unlike Caulifla's attack, the Rasengan didn't pass through. Instead, the entity emitted a high-pitched keening sound as golden light spread throughout its form, causing it to writhe and contort before dissipating into particles that faded away. That worked, Kale called out, watching wide-eyed. It's the nature energy, Naruto realized. These things exist outside normal physical laws, they need to be countered with energy that transcends physical form. Caulifla scowled, clearly frustrated that her attacks had proven ineffective. So what, we just let you handle them? Not necessarily, Naruto replied, quickly forming a plan. Try channeling your energy differently, not as a physical force, but as an extension of your will. Focus on purification, not destruction. Kale, who had remained defensive until now, cautiously extended her hand toward an approaching entity. Her energy, rather than the explosive power Caulifla had demonstrated, emerged as a steady green glow. As it touched the shadow, the entity slowed its advance, seeming to struggle against her influence. "It's working, sis," Kale called out, her confidence growing. As she pushed more power into her technique. Caulifla watched for a moment before adjusting her approach. When she next attacked, her energy was more controlled, still intense but focused into a concentrated beam rather than an explosive burst. This time, the shadow entity recoiled, portions of its mass disintegrating under the sustained assault. More shadows were approaching now, drawn to the island like moths to flame. Naruto quickly created a dozen shadow clones that formed a perimeter, each armed with Rasengan variations. "We need to coordinate," he called out. "My clones will maintain the perimeter. Caulifla, take the eastern approach. Kale, handle the west. I'll create a barrier to buy us time." To his mild surprise, neither woman objected to his taking command. Instead, they moved immediately to their assigned positions, adapting their techniques based on what had proven effective. Naruto planted his palms on the ground, channeling a massive surge of chakra. Barrier technique. Golden Sanctuary. From his position, golden chakra flowed outward in a precise geometric pattern, forming a dome of interlocking seals that encompassed the entire island. As shadow entities struck the barrier, they hissed and recoiled, unable to penetrate the chakra-infused defense. "This will hold them temporarily," Naruto explained, maintaining the technique with steady concentration. Quote, "But I need to understand what they are to create a permanent solution." Keeping the barrier active, Naruto closed his eyes and extended his senses, attempting to perceive the nature of their attackers. What he discovered was unexpected. The shadows weren't sentient beings at all, but rather manifestations of the void itself, responding to the anomaly of created matter in their domain. "They're like antibodies," Kurama suggested. "The void attempting to eliminate what doesn't belong." "Then we need to establish that we do belong," Naruto murmured. "Not fight them, but harmonize with them." Opening his eyes, he called to the others. "I'm going to try something. Be ready to defend yourselves if it fails." "What exactly are you planning?" Caulifla demanded, blasting another entity that had partially breached the barrier. "Something probably stupid," Naruto admitted with a grin that momentarily disarmed her. "But sometimes stupid works." Before she could protest, Naruto dispelled the barrier and immediately sat cross-legged, assuming a meditation pose. Golden chakra enveloped his body, but instead of projecting outward aggressively, it pulsed in a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. The shadow entities surged forward without the barrier restraining them, but as they approached Naruto, something unusual happened. Rather than attacking, they began to circle him cautiously, our movements becoming increasingly synchronized with his chakra pulses. "What's happening?" Kale whispered, watching in fascination. "He's communicating with them somehow," Caulifla replied, her voice betraying reluctant admiration. Naruto's expression showed intense concentration as he established a connection with the void entities. Through his sage-enhanced senses, he began to understand their nature, not malevolent, merely protective of the natural order. With subtle adjustments to his chakra frequency, he conveyed that their presence wasn't a threat but a new form of balance. Gradually, the shadows' movements became less erratic, more deliberate. They continued circling but maintained a respectful distance from the island's boundaries. After several tense minutes, Naruto opened his eyes and slowly stood. "I think we've reached an understanding." Caulifla approached, eyeing the now passive shadow entities suspiciously. "What exactly did you do?" "Established equilibrium," Naruto explained. "They're not actually enemies, more like natural forces responding to what they perceive as an invasion. I showed them that we can exist here without disrupting the fundamental nature of this void." "You communicated with mindless void entities?" Caulifla's tone was disbelieving. "Not with words," Naruto clarified. "With energy and intent. It's similar to how I communicate with natural energy in sage mode." Kale had been observing the shadow entities with curiosity rather than fear. "They almost seem peaceful now." "They'll leave us alone as long as we maintain balance," Naruto confirmed. "No unchecked expansion, no aggressive energy discharge into the void. With the immediate threat neutralized, an awkward silence fell over the three displaced beings. They were, after all, strangers from entirely different realities, thrown together by cosmic circumstances beyond their control. Caulifla was the first to break the silence. So what now, ninja boy? We just live on your little fantasy island forever. Naruto shook his head. I don't intend to stay here permanently, and I doubt you do either. There must be a way back to our respective worlds, or at least somewhere besides this void. Our universe was erased from existence, Kale reminded him softly. There might not be anything to go back to. The reality of their situation settled heavily over them. Caulifla turned away, her expression hardening as she gazed out into the endless darkness. Kale's shoulders slumped slightly, the brief hope fading from her eyes. Naruto studied them both, recognizing familiar signs of people facing seemingly insurmountable odds. It was a feeling he'd known many times throughout his life, the weight of impossible circumstances pressing down, threatening to crush all hope. I don't accept that, he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. I've faced impossible situations before. Been told things couldn't be fixed, couldn't be changed. And you know what? They were wrong every time. Caulifla turned back, skepticism written across her features. This isn't some battle you can win with determination and fancy techniques. An entire universe, trillions of beings, countless planets, all erased by a being with absolute power. Maybe, Naruto acknowledged, but we're still here, aren't we? You two survived somehow. That alone suggests erasure isn't as absolute as you believe. The pocket dimension protected us temporarily, Kale explained. But it was collapsing. If you hadn't found us when you did. But I did find you, Naruto pointed out. Call it coincidence, call it fate, either way. Three survivors from different universes managing to connect in an infinite void seems significant, doesn't it? Neither woman responded immediately, but Someth-ing shifted in their expressions, the faintest glimmer of consideration. Naruto continued, warming to his theme. If I can create this island from nothing but my chakra, who's to say what else might be possible? Maybe we can't restore an entire universe overnight, but we can start small. Find others who might have survived. Gather knowledge. Build something from nothing. Just like this island. Why? You're either the most optimistic or the most delusional person I've ever met, Caulifla remarked, though without her earlier hostility. Naruto laughed. I've been called worse, usually right before proving those people wrong. Even Caulifla couldn't completely suppress a slight upward twitch of her lips at that. I think, Kale ventured hesitantly, that having a goal is better than floating endlessly in that pocket dimension. Waiting for it to collapse. Exactly, Naruto nodded encouragingly. And our first goal should be expanding our knowledge. You two know about multiple universes, tournaments between them, and beings powerful enough to erase reality. I need to understand all of that if we're going to figure out what happened and how to fix it. Caulifla crossed her arms, studying Naruto with narrowed eyes. After a moment of consideration, she gave a curt nod. Fine, knowledge exchange it is, but this partnership is temporary, until we find a better option. Fair enough, Naruto agreed, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Caulifla clasped it firmly, her grip strong enough to crush ordinary bones, though Naruto matched it without flinching. As their impromptu alliance formed, none of them noticed a subtle shimmer in the void several kilometers distant. There, the faintest outline of a slender figure with a staff began to take shape, observing the unlikely trio with growing interest. Vados, angel attendant to the god of destruction of Universe 6, had not been completely erased. Her consciousness, bound to laws beyond even Zeno's full understanding, had persisted in a dormant state within the void where her universe once existed. Now, drawn by the unprecedented phenomenon of creation within nothingness, her form was gradually reconstituting. Shi-Wa, Tched as the golden-haired being from another reality spoke animatedly to the two Saiyan women, gesturing at the island he'd manifested from pure energy. Such creation should have been impossible for a mortal, yet she had witnessed it firsthand. Most interesting, she murmured, her voice barely more than a thought in the emptiness. Perhaps Universe 6 isn't quite as erased as it appears. With that observation, she retreated deeper into the void, her partially formed consciousness needing time to process these developments before making her presence known. Back on the island, Naruto had created a simple shelter. A circular pavilion with a domed roof supported by pillars, open to the surroundings yet offering a sense of security. Within this space, the three displaced beings gathered to share knowledge. Start at the beginning, Naruto suggested, sitting cross-legged on a cushion he'd manifested. Explain these universes to me. Caulifla and Kale exchanged glances, silently debating who should speak. Eventually, Kale nodded to Caulifla, deferring to her more assertive personality. There are 12 universes in total, or there were, Caulifla began, pacing restlessly as she spoke. They exist in pairs, adding up to 13. Universe 6 and Universe 7 are twins, mirror images with many of the same species and planets, but with different histories. Each universe has a supreme Kai who creates, and a god of destruction who, well, destroys, Kale added softly. They maintain balance. Above them are the Grand Priest and Zeno, the Omni King. And this Zeno decided to erase entire universes? Naruto asked, struggling to comprehend the casual annihilation of trillions of lives. The tournament of power was his idea, Caulifla confirmed, her expression darkening. 8 universes forced to fight, with the losers facing complete erasure. Only the winning universe would survive. Naruto searched for words. That's monstrous. That's divinity, Caulifla replied with a bitter laugh. Gods playing games with mortal lives. Naruto had faced those who considered themselves gods before. Kagaya, Madara, Pain, all believing their power gave them the rig. To reshape reality according to their vision. This Zeno seemed cut from similar cloth, merely operating on a vastly larger scale. So Universe 6 lost this tournament, he summarized. And everything was erased. Except somehow you two survived in that pocket dimension, and I got pulled from my world into this void. That about covers it, Caulifla confirmed. Though I still don't understand how you ended up here specifically. There should be nothing left of Universe 6 to pull anything in. Naruto frowned thoughtfully. Maybe that's exactly why. Nature abhors a vacuum, as they say. Perhaps. The complete absence of a universe created a kind of gravitational pull for dimensional travelers. You were traveling between dimensions when it happened? Kale asked. Not intentionally, Naruto clarified. But I was standing at a location in my world with special significance, a monument carved with the faces of all previous Hokage, including mine. It's a place with concentrated natural energy. That might have made me more susceptible to dimensional rifts. As they talked, Naruto continued making small adjustments to their island sanctuary, adding details that improved habitability, a freshwater spring, fruit-bearing trees, comfortable sleeping areas separated by carefully placed vegetation for privacy. The casual display of creation from nothing still visibly unsettled his companions. Your turn, Caulifla said abruptly. Tell us about your world and these powers of yours. Naruto nodded, gathering his thoughts. I come from a world of shinobi, ninja who use chakra to perform various techniques. Chakra is a combination of physical and spiritual energy that flows through pathways in the body, similar to your ki but with some fundamental differences. He went on to explain. In the basics of his world, the hidden villages, the great nations, the history of conflict and gradual movement toward peace. He told them about the tailed beasts, including Kurama, and how he'd grown from outcast child to respected leader. So you have a giant fox spirit sealed inside you, Caulifla summarized skeptically. I take offense to that oversimplification, Kurama grumbled in Naruto's mind. Kurama is much more than that, Naruto corrected. He's a sentient being of immense power and wisdom, and my partner. Can he? Kale hesitated. Can he hear us now? Yes, Naruto confirmed. He's aware of everything I see and hear. Would you like to meet him properly? Both women tensed visibly. Meet him how exactly? Caulifla asked warily. Instead of answering directly, Naruto closed his eyes in concentration. Golden chakra enveloped him, then extended outward, forming a translucent projection of Kurama's upper body beside him. The massive fox head towered over them, 9 tails swaying gently behind him. Greetings, Saiyans of Universe 6, Kurama's deep voice resonated through the air. My name is Kurama, the 9-tailed fox. Caulifla immediately dropped into a fighting stance, energy crackling around her fists. Kale stepped back, her eyes wide but her posture suggesting she was ready to transform if necessary. It's all right, Naruto assured them quickly. This is just a chakra projection. Kurama's consciousness temporarily given form outside my body. He's not a threat to you. Unless you make yourselves threats to Naruto, Kurama added with a tooth. Why grin that did nothing to ease their tension? Kurama, Naruto sighed, you're not helping. The fox chuckled, the sound rumbling like distant thunder. My apologies. Old habits die hard. I mean you no harm, Saiyan warriors. In fact, I believe our unusual circumstances have aligned our interests. Caulifla relaxed slightly, though suspicion remained evident in her stance. So you're basically a power source for him to draw on. Kurama's eyes narrowed. I am no one's battery. Naruto and I are partners, equals in a relationship forged through mutual respect and shared hardship. Something I suspect you might understand. Given your own partnership. His gaze shifted meaningfully between Caulifla and Kale, causing the former to stiffen and the latter to blush slightly. Sis has been teaching me to be stronger. Kale explained quietly. She believes in me when no one else did. Kale has potential beyond anything our universe has seen, Caulifla stated firmly. She just needs confidence to unlock it fully. Naruto observed this exchange with interest, noting the dynamics between the two women, Caulifla's protective pride and Kale's admiration tinged with something deeper. It reminded him of bonds he'd witnessed and experienced, complicated relationships forged in the crucible of shared struggle. You're both warriors of exceptional caliber, Kurama acknowledged. I can sense the depths of your power even in its dormant state. Particularly yours, Quiet One. Kale blinked in surprise at being singled out by the massive entity. Kurama has a sense for these things, Naruto explained. He's existed for centuries and encountered countless powerful beings. The girl harbors something familiar to me, Kurama continued. A transformation that threatens to overwhelm consciousness. Raw power that can consume its vessel if not properly mastered. Kale looked down, a shadow passing over her features. My berserker form. I lose control when it takes over. She's getting better at managing it. Caulifla interjected defensively. Kale achieved a controlled Super Saiyan form during the tournament. Naruto leaned forward, genuinely interested. I understand what that's like. Before Kurama and I became partners, his chakra would sometimes take over when I experienced intense emotion, usually anger. It was destructive, painful, and I had no control. How did you master it? Kale asked softly, looking up with the first real hope Naruto had seen in her eyes. Not through suppression, Naruto replied. That never works long-term. Instead, I had to confront the source of the power directly, understand it, acknowledge it as part of myself, and establish mutual respect. The key difference, Kurama interjected, is that I am a separate sentient being with my own consciousness. Your transformation appears to be an aspect of your own power, Kale, not an external entity you can negotiate with directly. But the principle might still apply, Naruto suggested. Instead of fearing the berserker form, maybe you need to acknowledge it as a valid expression of your true strength, not something to suppress, but something to integrate. Kale considered this, a thoughtful expression replacing her usual anxiety. No one's ever suggested approaching it that way before. That's because Saiyans typically embrace rage as a power source, Caulifla pointed out. Control usually means directing the destructive urges, not harmonizing with them. Different approaches for different worlds, Naruto acknowledged. But if you're interested, I could help you explore techniques from my world that might help. Mindfulness training, chakra control exercises, they might translate to ki manipulation. Why would you help us? Caulifla asked bluntly. We're still basically strangers, and you have your own problems to solve. Naruto smiled, a genuine, warm expression that momentarily caught both women off guard. Because that's what I do. Throughout my life, I've connected with people others considered dangerous or beyond help. Sometimes the person who can most help you is someone who's walked a similar path. His simple sincerity seemed to disarm even Caulifla's practiced cynicism. She studied him for a long moment before giving a slight nod. We'll consider it, she said, which Naruto correctly interpreted as significant concession from the proud Saiyan warrior. As their conversation continued into the endless night of the void, none of them could know that their unlikely alliance was already sending ripples through what remained of Universe 6. In distant corners of the nothingness, Fragments of existence began to stir, minute particles of what once was, responding to the golden energy that had introduced creation back into the void. And in her partially manifested state, Vados watched with growing certainty that she was witnessing something unprecedented in all cosmic history, the potential rebirth of an erased universe through means the gods themselves had never contemplated. The Golden Healer, she whispered to herself, testing the phrase that had spontaneously formed in her consciousness. How very interesting indeed. 3 days passed according to the arbitrary time cycle Naruto had established on their island, creating day and night through an artificial sun he manifested above them. During this time, the unlikely trio established a routine of sorts. Mornings began with training, Naruto demonstrating basic chakra control exercises that Caulifla and Kale attempted to adapt to their ki manipulation. While the energies were fundamentally different, certain principles translated effectively, particularly those involving concentration and visualization. Caulifla proved exceptionally quick to adapt techniques to her aggressive fighting style, while Kale showed surprising aptitude for the meditative aspects of chakra control. Both women, in turn, helped Naruto understand ki energy and its applications. Expanding his own conceptual framework. Your shadow clones are useful, Caulifla admitted grudgingly after a particularly intense sparring session where Naruto had used them to analyze her fighting style from multiple angles simultaneously. But they're too fragile. One solid hit and they disappear. That's by design, Naruto explained, wiping sweat from his brow. Their purpose isn't frontline combat but information gathering, distraction, and tactical advantage. When they disperse, all their experiences return to me. Caulifla paused, considering the implications. So you could send clones to explore different directions in this void, and when they disperse, you'd know everything they discovered. Exactly, Naruto nodded. Though in this environment, I'm not sure how far they could travel before the void itself would dissipate them. Worth testing, Caulifla decided, her tactical mind quickly assessing possibilities. If we're going to find a way back, or find others who might have survived, we need reconnaissance. Kale, who had been practicing a breathing technique Naruto taught her, joined the conversation. The void seems less hungry since you established balance with those shadow entities. Maybe your clones could travel further now. Naruto considered this. Let's find out. Forming a familiar cross seal, he created 5 shadow clones. Each oriented toward a different direction before leaping from the island's edge, forming golden chakra platforms beneath their feet as they raced into the darkness. Now we wait, Naruto said. If they find anything significant, I'll know immediately when they disperse. As the clones disappeared from sight, Caulifla turned to more practical matters. We should expand this island. If we're stuck here long-term, we'll need more resources. I've been careful about expansion because of the void entities, Naruto reminded her. Too much creation too quickly might disrupt the balance we established. Then do it gradually, Caulifla countered. A little each day, letting the void adjust to each change before making another. It was a reasonable suggestion, and Naruto nodded in agreement. We could start by adding terrain variations, perhaps mountains to the north, a forest to the east. And a proper training ground, Caulifla added immediately. Somewhere we can go all out without worrying about destroying essential resources. What about a hot spring? Kale suggested quietly. When both turned to look at her in surprise, she blushed slightly. For relaxation and, well, actual bathing would be nice. Naruto chuckled. Hot spring it is. Let me try something a bit more structured this time. Rather than simply pushing chakra outward as he had initially, Naruto sat in a meditation pose and began carefully mapping the proposed additions in his mind. Once he had a clear mental blueprint, he channeled his chakra with precise control, directing it to specific locations and with definite purpose. Golden energy flowed from his body in concentrated streams, extending to the island's northern edge where it began forming rocky outcroppings that gradually rose into modest mountains. The process was slower than his earlier creation but far more detailed, each rock formation unique, with crevices, caves, and varying mineral compositions. Caulifla and Kale watched in fascination as the landscape transformed before their eyes. When Naruto opened his eyes an hour later, a small mountain range crowned the northern horizon, complete with a cascading waterfall feeding into a steaming hot spring nestled among smooth rocks. That's. Kale seemed at a loss for words. Not bad, ninja boy, Caulifla acknowledged, genuine admiration briefly overtaking her usual gruffness. You've actually got some useful skills. Naruto rose to his feet, looking pleased with his creation despite the chakra expenditure evident in his slightly heavier breathing. The hot spring should maintain its temp. Aerator naturally. I incorporated a heat source beneath it, and those mountains should provide some interesting training opportunities. Before they could explore further, Naruto suddenly stiffened, his eyes widening. One of my clones just dispersed, he announced. It found something, or someone. Both Saiyans immediately went on alert. Hostile, Caulifla demanded, already gathering ki in her palms. No, not hostile, Naruto replied, processing the clone's memories. It's difficult to describe. My clone encountered what seemed like a fragment of consciousness, not fully formed, but definitely sentient. It was aware of us and specifically interested in what we're doing here. Did this fragment identify itself? Kale asked. Not exactly, Naruto frowned. But it seemed to recognize you too. I got a sense of blue skin, white hair, and a staff of some kind. Both women's expressions transformed instantly, Caulifla's to shock and Kale's to something approaching reverent hope. Vados, they said in unison. The angel attendant to Universe 6, a god of destruction, Kale explained quickly. If she's somehow survived, this changes everything, Caulifla finished, excitement evident in her voice. Angels exist outside normal universal constraints. If Vados is still here in some form, she might know how to restore Universe 6, or at least how to navigate between realities. Naruto absorbed this information, connecting it with the impression he'd received from his clone. She seemed incomplete, as if she was still in the process of reforming herself. Angels can be destroyed in the conventional sense, Kale explained. When their assigned universe is erased, they simply become inactive until assigned elsewhere. But this situation is unprecedented, Universe E. Roger, followed by your arrival and the creation of new matter in the void. My clone extended an invitation before it was dispersed, Naruto told them. If this Vados can or wishes to manifest more fully, she knows where to find us. Then we prepare, Caulifla decided. If an angel is coming, we need to make sure we present ourselves as worth her attention. The implication was clear. If this Vados was indeed reforming and capable of helping them navigate their cosmic predicament, they needed to demonstrate that they were worthy of such assistance. For beings as powerful as angels, trivia, concerns and limited perspectives were beneath notice. Tell me everything you know about angels, Naruto requested as they moved toward the pavilion. Their nature, their limitations, what motivates them, everything that might help us approach this Vados effectively. As Caulifla and Kale shared their knowledge about celestial hierarchies, Naruto listened intently, formulating a strategy. If Angels operated by different rules than mortals, if they existed outside normal universal constraints, then perhaps they represented the key to not just survival, but restoration. For the first time since arriving in this void, he felt something beyond determination. He felt genuine hope. Not just for his own return home, but for something far more significant, the possibility that an entire universe might not be permanently lost after all. The remainder of Naruto's clones returned over the next several hours, each dispersing upon reaching what appeared to be their operational limits in the void. None had encountered anything as significant as the fragment of Vados, but all reported subtle changes in the void's composition at extreme distances from their island. It's as if the nothingness becomes less absolute the further you travel, Naruto explained, piecing together the clone memories. Small particles of something floating in the emptiness. Almost like dust motes in sunlight. But they don't appear to be physical matter. Remnants, Kale suggested quietly. Fragments of what used to be Universe 6, too small to be completely erased. Caulifla paced energetically, processing this information. If there are remnants, then erasure isn't absolute. And if it's not absolute, then restoration might be possible, Naruto completed her thought. Though we'd need to understand how these fragments survived and how to potentially gather or expand them. Their discussion continued well into the artificial night Naruto had created, theories and possibilities flowing freely as the unlikely trio began to develop not just cooperation, but something approaching trust. It was during a momentary lull in conversation that they sensed it, a presence approaching their island. Distinct from the void entities they'd previously encountered. All three warriors were instantly alert, moving outside the pavilion to face the disturbance. From the darkness emerged a slender figure, stepping onto the island with graceful precision. Blue-skinned and white-haired as Naruto had described, she carried a long staff topped with a floating orb. Her expression was serene, almost detached. Yet her eyes held ancient intelligence as they assessed the three beings before her. Vados, Caulifla breathed, for once sounding genuinely awed. The angel inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. Caulifla, Kale, it appears you have found a most unusual ally in your predicament. Her gaze shifted to Naruto, studying him with penetrating intensity. And you must be the anomaly, the being capable of creation within the void. How very interesting. Naruto met her gaze steadily, sensing the immense power contained within her seemingly delicate form. This was a being far beyond RMAL mortal constraints, perhaps comparable to the Sage of Six Paths in her fundamental nature. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he introduced himself with a respectful bow. I was pulled into this void from another reality entirely. Yes, I can see that, Vados replied, her voice melodic yet somehow distant. Your energy signature is unlike anything from the 12 universes. And yet, it harmonizes with what remains of Universe 6 in most fascinating ways. She turned in a slow circle, examining the island with analytical precision. You've created matter and energy from nothingness, a feat typically reserved for gods of creation. Most curious indeed. Can you tell us what happened? Caulifla asked, unusually deferential in the angel's presence. We know Universe 6 lost the tournament of power and was erased. But why are fragments remaining? How did we survive? Vados tapped her staff gently on the ground, creating ripples of energy that spread outward. Universe 6 was indeed erased by Zeno-sama. However, the introduction of an interdimensional traveler, she nodded toward Naruto, at precisely the moment of cosmic reformation has created an unprecedented situation. Cosmic reformation? Kale questioned. After the tournament concluded, the winning universe wished for all erased universes to be restored, Vados explained. That process was underway when this shinobi's Val created a localized disruption in Universe 6's reformation pattern. Naruto frowned, processing this information. So Universe 6 should have been completely restored already. My arrival somehow interfered with that. Not precisely. Vados corrected. Your arrival created a nexus point, a focal connection between your reality and the reforming Universe 6. Instead of reforming according to its original pattern, the universal energy has begun reorganizing around your presence and the unique properties of your chakra. She gestured at the island beneath their feet. This creation of yours is not merely matter formed from energy, it is the first seed of a new Universe 6, taking shape around a core of foreign energy that the void finds acceptable. All three mortals stared at her in shock as the implications became clear. You're saying, Caulifla began, struggling to articulate the enormity of the concept. I'm accidentally recreating an entire universe. Naruto finished, disbelief evident in his voice. Vados's expression remained impassive, though something like amusement flickered in her eyes. Not accidentally, no. Your chakra, particularly when melded with the entity within you, resonates at a frequency that mimics divine creation energy. The void recognizes it is authorized to exist, unlike most mortal energies that would be immediately consumed. Kurama and I together, Naruto murmured, instinctively placing a hand over his seal. This explains the unusual response of our chakra here, Kurama rumbled within him. We're not just creating matter, we're establishing fundamental cosmic principles. Is there any way to accelerate this process? Caulifla asked eagerly. To restore Universe 6 completely. Vados regarded her with a hint of admonishment. Universal restoration is not something to approach hastily, saying. The natural order has been disrupted in unprecedented ways. Attempting to force rapid recreation could result in a fundamentally unstable universe, one that might collapse with catastrophic consequences. So what can we do? Kale asked softly. The angel turned to Naruto. The one you call Kurama, may I address him directly? Naruto nodded, summoning Kurama's chakra projection as he had done earlier. The massive fox head materialized beside him, 9 tails swaying gently in the artificial breeze. Angel of Universe 6, Kurama acknowledged with unexpected formality. You wish to speak with me. Your nature is most fascinating, Vados observed, showing her first signs of genuine interest. You are a being of pure, chakra-given consciousness and form, not unlike the gods of destruction in certain respects, though your creation was through very different means. I am one of 9 such beings from our world, Kurama explained. Fragments of an original 10-tailed entity, given separate consciousness by mortal man centuries ago. The resonance between your energy and Naruto's is the key, Vados explained. When perfectly harmonized, it creates a signature that mimics aspects of creation energy. Not identical, but similar enough that the void accepts it as belonging. She turned back to address all of them. What you have begun cannot be undone, but neither should it be rushed. This new Universe 6 will form gradually around this seed you've planted, incorporating the fragments that remained after erasure. And the people, the planets, everything that was destroyed, Caulifla pressed. For the first time, Vados's serene expression faltered slightly. That is, unclear. Original patterns I reassert themselves as the universal energy coalesces, but the introduction of foreign elements, again she nodded toward Naruto, suggests the reformation may not be identical to what existed before. Kale's face fell at this, while Caulifla's hands clenched into frustrated fists. So even if the universe reforms, everyone might still be gone, Caulifla summarized bitterly. Not necessarily, Naruto interjected, an idea forming. If fragments remain, and if my energy can serve as a catalyst for restoration, perhaps we can be more intentional about the process. All eyes turned to him. Explain, Vados requested, genuine curiosity in her tone. Instead of letting the reformation happen passively around this island, what if we actively seek out the largest remaining fragments? The places where the most substantial remnants of Universe 6 still exist. We could establish additional creation points at those locations, creating a network of restoration sites rather than a single origin point. Vados considered this, tapping her staff thoughtfully. Theoretically sound, though practically challenging. The void is vast, and the fragments widely scattered. I could send shadow clones in all directions, Naruto suggested. Hundreds of them, each carrying a portion of my chakra. When they locate significant fragments, they could establish small creation points before dispersing to return the information to me. And once we know where these fragments are, we could travel to the most promising locations, Caulifla added, building on the idea. Establish larger, permanent creation points. The void entities might resist such widespread creation, Kale pointed out. Not necessarily, Naruto countered. They've accepted our presence here because we established balance. If we maintain that same principle at each new site, creation in harmony with the void rather than against it, they might accept a network of restoration points. Vados observed this exchange with growing interest. Her head tilted slightly as if listening to something beyond mortal perception. Your proposal has merit, she finally said, though it would require refinement and careful implementation. The balance between creation and void must be maintained at each point, and the connections between sites must follow natural cosmic patterns rather than arbitrary placement. You could guide that part, Caulifla suggested. Angels understand cosmic geometry better than anyone. Vados raised an eyebrow at the Saiyan's presumption but didn't disagree. My form is still not fully materialized in this partial reality. I can offer guidance but limited direct assistance until the reformation progresses further. That's enough, Naruto assured her. Between your knowledge and our abilities, we can make this work. For the first time, Vados smiled, a small, controlled expression, yet somehow transformative to her entire demeanor. Perhaps you can. How interesting that the Restorer, Chion of Universe 6 might come not from divine decree but mortal determination. She raised her staff, and the orb at its top began to glow with soft light. I shall provide you with a map of cosmic resonance points, locations where fragments of Universe 6 have the strongest remaining presence. Focus your efforts there first. Light from her staff projected outward, forming a three-dimensional representation of the void surrounding their island. Glowing points of varying sizes appeared throughout the projection, some barely visible, others shining brightly. The 12 brightest points repris. And what remains of the 12 core worlds of Universe 6, Vados explained. Begin with these, establishing creation seeds at each location in the pattern I will provide. As the unlikely allies gathered around the glowing projection, the first true plan for universal restoration began to take shape. None of them, not even Vados herself, could fully comprehend the unprecedented nature of what they were attempting, nor the far-reaching consequences their actions would have across the multiverse. For in the highest realms, beyond even the angel's direct perception, the first whispers of a new TLE had already begun to circulate. The Golden Healer, the mortal who restored what gods had erased. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Foundations of a New World. The void between universes had no concept of time. No rising or setting sun. No celestial bodies marking the passage of hours, days, or years. Only the artificial day-night cycle Naruto had created gave any structure to their existence as the unlikely allies prepared for the monumental task before them. Dawn broke over their island sanctuary, golden light spreading across the landscape as Naruto manipulated the miniature sun he'd manifested overhead. The warm rays illuminated a changed environment. Where once there had been only a simple pavilion and basic terrain, now stood an organized base of operations with purpose-built structures. A central command building with a large circular table displaying Vados's map of cosmic resonance points, separate living quarters constructed to each inhabitant's preferences, and a dedicated trainin' ground where the mountain range met the forest. Explain to me again why we need physical maps when Vados literally showed us a glowing 3D model. Caulifla demanded, leaning against the doorframe of the command center. Arms crossed over her chest. She'd adapted her usual attire slightly, incorporating bands of golden material Naruto had created that enhanced ki circulation, her first grudging adoption of his chakra concepts. Because, Naruto replied patiently, not looking up from the intricate diagrams he was drawing, Vados can't maintain her form consistently in this partial reality yet. We need reference materials for when she's not present. And because physical representations help with visualization, Kale added softly from where she sat cross-legged nearby, eyes closed in meditation. Unlike Caulifla, she had embraced Naruto's chakra training enthusiastically, finding that his techniques for controlling internal energy had unexpected benefits for managing her berserker form. Caulifla made a noncommittal noise but approached the table nonetheless, studying the map Naruto had created. 12 points of varying sizes were marked in precise geometric relation to one another, connected by lines forming a complex pattern that resembled a multi-pointed star. This configuration seems unnecessarily complicated, she observed. Cosmic geometry cannot be simplified without consequences. Came Vados's melodic voice as the angel materialized near the table, her form slightly more substantial than during her first appearance. Universal reformation must follow precise mathematical principles or risk structural instability. Naruto looked up, acknowledging Vados with a respectful nod. The angel's appearances remained unpredictable, sometimes materializing for hours, times merely flickering into existence briefly before fading away. I've prepared everything for the first expedition, he reported, gesturing to the equipment arranged neatly by the door, special IZED containers he'd created to carry concentrated chakra, communicators fashioned from chakra-conductive materials, and rations for the journey. We'll depart for the primary resonance point once the final preparations are complete. I still think splitting up would be more efficient, Caulifla argued, not for the first time. We could cover 3 points simultaneously instead of moving together. Vados tapped her staff gently on the floor, drawing everyone's attention. The first creation seed must be established with precision. The geometric relationship between it and this island will determine the structural integrity of the entire restoration network. All 3 of you possess qualities necessary for its successful implementation. Vados is right, Naruto agreed. Once the primary point is established, we can consider dividing forces for the secondary locations. Caulifla rolled her eyes but didn't argue further. Over the past weeks, if the artificial day cycles could be called weeks, she had developed a grudging respect for both Naruto's strategic thinking and Vados's cosmic knowledge. Fine, when do we leave? She asked, straightening up with barely concealed eagerness. Despite her complaints, the prospect of action after weeks of preparation clearly appealed to her. After one final training session, Naruto replied, rolling up the maps and diagrams. The Void Ent. Itties have been relatively peaceful near our island, but we don't know how they'll react to creation energy being released elsewhere. We need to be perfectly synchronized. The training ground B, or the marks of intensive use, craters from key blasts, kunai embedded in target posts, and trees bent at odd angles from powerful techniques. Here, the three warriors had spent countless hours refining their abilities in developing new combined techniques that merged Naruto's chakra mastery with the science key manipulation. Naruto stood at the center of the field, eyes closed in concentration. A's golden chakra flowed visible through his network. When he opened his eyes, they had transformed to the horizontal pupils of Sage Mode, enhanced further by Kurama's influence. Today we're focusing on synchronized energy release, he announced as Caulifla and Kale took positions forming a triangle with him. When we establish the new creation seed, our energies need to harmonize perfectly or risk disrupting the cosmic geometry. We've practiced this a dozen times already, Caulifla complained, though she dropped into the stance they'd developed, feet shoulder-width apart, one palm facing upward to receive energy. The other extended toward the center of their formation. And we'll practice it a dozen more if necessary, Naruto replied calmly. Universal reconstruction isn't something we get second chances at. Kale had already assumed her position, her expression showing the intense concentration that had become characteristic during their training sessions. Of the two Saiyans, she had shown the most aptitude for the finer aspects of chakra control, her natural sensitivity to energy flow allowing her to adapt Naruto's techniques with surprising ease. Begin with individual energy gathering, Naruto instructed. Full power, but contained until the synchronization point. Each warrior summoned their respective energy, Naruto's golden chakra spiraling outward from his core, Caulifla's brilliant blue ki flaring around her form, and Kale's emerald energy pulsing in controlled waves. The three distinct energy signatures illuminated the training ground in a spectacular light. Show that would have dazzled any observer. Now, primary containment, Naruto called out. The energies compressed inward, drawing close to each warrior's body in tight, controlled auras. This was part Caulifla had struggled with most. Her natural fighting style favored explosive power rather than compression, but weeks of rigorous practice had improved her control significantly. Secondary circulation. Connect the triangle. 3 beams of energy extended from each warrior to the others, forming a perfect triangular circuit. Where the energies met, small flares of light marked the initial resistance before harmonization began. Naruto winced slightly as Caulifla's ki made contact with his chakra network. The foreign energy always felt abrasive initially, like rough sandpaper against his meridians. Similarly, Caulifla's grimace indicated his chakra felt equally strange flowing through her ki pathways. Only Kale showed no discomfort, her unique energy composition allowing her to adapt more easily to the mixture. She had explained once that her berserker form had always made her energy feel divided against itself, making the addition of external energy merely another layer to harmonize rather than a foreign invasion. Final phase, convergence at center point. All three directed their combined energy toward the center of their triangle. Golden chakra, blue ki, and emerald power spiraled together, forming a pulsing sphere that grew steadily in size and intensity. The real challenge came in maintaining perfect balance. If any one energy dominated, the sphere would destabilize. Sweat beaded on Naruto's forehead as he carefully modulated his output, ensuring his naturally expansive chakra didn't overwhelm the formation. Beside him, Caulifla's face showed unusual concentration, her competitive nature channeled into achieving perfect control rather than maximum power. The sphere reached optimal size, approximately 1 meter in diameter, and held stable, its surface owing mesmerizing patterns as the 3 energy types flowed together without fully merging. Hold, Naruto commanded, watching the energy patterns carefully. Hold. The sphere's rotation increased, the distinct energies beginning to blend more thoroughly at the boundaries. Now, compression. All 3 warriors made identical gestures, drawing their outstretched hands into tight fists. The sphere responded immediately, shrinking rapidly until it was no larger than an apple, its light intensity increasing proportionally. Perfect, Naruto breathed, genuine pride in his voice. That's exactly what we need. Vados confirmed this level of harmonization will be sufficient to establish the creation seed. The compressed sphere continued to spin between them, now stable enough that they could reduce their active control. This had been the breakthrough they'd achieved just days earlier, creating an energy construct that maintained its integrity without constant input. Caulifla allowed herself a satisfied smile. Not bad, though I still think my key could handle the whole thing without all this complicated blending. Your confidence remains as robust as ever, Vados commented, earing at the edge of the training ground with characteristic silence. Though I must point out that neither Saiyan Ki nor Shinobi Chakra alone would suffice for this procedure. The restoration requires, specifically the harmonized energy you've created. She approached the floating sphere, examining it with analytical precision. The balance is acceptable. You have made remarkable progress for beings of such different origin. Coming from Vados, this constituted high praise indeed. The angel rarely commented on their training beyond clinical observations and technical corrections. We're ready then, Naruto asked, carefully dissolving the energy sphere through a controlled release sequence they had developed. Vados nodded, her expression remaining impassive though her eyes showed a glimmer of what might have been anticipation. The cosmic alignment will reach optimal position in approximately 6 hours. Prepare your equipment and rest beforehand. The journey to the primary resonance point will require significant energy expenditure. The edge of their island sanctuary represented a clear boundary between creation and void. Beyond the softly glowing perimeter Naruto had established, absolute darkness stretched infinitely in all directions, broken only occasionally by the drifting shadow entities that had settled into a peaceful coexistence with the island. Naruto stood at this boundary, fully equipped and mentally prepared for the expedition ahead. The specialized containers he'd created were secured across his back, each holding concentrated chakra reserves that would be necessary for establishing the creation seed. Additional storage scrolls containing supplies and emergency equipment were fastened to his belt alongside his standard shinobi tools. Beside him, Caulifla adjusted the communicator at her wrist, a device Naruto had fashioned from chakra-conductive metal that would allow them to maintain contact even if separated in the void. Unlike Naruto's equipment-heavy approach, she had opted for minimal gear, trusting in her natural Saiyan resilience and power. Kale completed their trio, her usual baggy outfit exchanged for a more practical bodysuit. With reinforced sections Naruto had created specifically to help channel and control her energy during potential berserker episodes. Around her neck hung a pendant containing a small amount of stable IZED harmonized energy, their insurance against worst-case scenarios. The primary resonance point lies approximately 200,000 kilometers in that direction, Vados explained, indicating a particular vector with her staff. Under normal circumstances, such distance would be trivial for beings of your power. However, the void resists conventional movement. You will need to establish a connection pathway as you travel. Like breadcrumbs marking our trail, Naruto nodded, having anticipated this challenge. I've prepared special markers for that purpose. He produced small, seed-like objects that glowed with gentle golden light. These contain compressed chakra programmed to maintain position once placed. They'll create a stable path we can follow back if needed. Your forethought is commendable, Vados acknowledged. I will monitor your progress from here, though my ability to intervene directly remains limited until more of Universe 6 materializes. Naruto turned to his companions with a confident smile. Ready. Caulifla punched her fists together, blue ki briefly illuminating her knuckles. Born ready. Let's get this universal reconstruction show on the road. Kale nodded, her quiet determination evident in the steady glow of green energy around her hands. With a final acknowledging nod to Vados, Naruto stepped beyond the island's boundary, instantly forming a platform of golden chakra beneath his feet. Caulifla and Kale followed, using their ki to create similar supporting structures, blue and green discs that hovered just below their feet. Remember, maintain energy signature harmony but minimal output, Naruto reminded them as they began moving forward into the darkness. We don't want to attract undue attention from void entities before reaching our destination. Yes, Sensei, Caulifla replied with exaggerated deference, though her smirk held less edge than it once would have. The weeks of training had gradually transformed their initial hostility into something resembling camaraderie, built on mutual respect for each other's abilities. As they advanced deeper into the void, Naruto periodically placed the marker seeds behind them, creating a glowing trail that stretched back toward their island. The darkness surrounding them seemed to grow heavier the further they traveled, pressing against their energy platforms with increasing resistance. "It's like moving through thick mud," Kale observed softly, adjusting her ki output to maintain forward momentum. "The void grows more resistant to foreign energy as you move away from established creation points." Vados's voice came through their communicators, slightly distorted but clear enough. This as expected. An hour into their journey, they encountered the first void entity's amorphous shadows that circled their path with wary curiosity. Unlike the initial hostile reaction near the island, these entities maintained distance, seemingly assessing the unusual procession through their domain. "They're different here," Naruto noted, extending his senses cautiously. "Less formed, more primitive somehow. Perhaps because they're further from the influence of your creation energy," Kale suggested. "The ones near our island have adapted to our presence." Caulifla's hands flared with energy instinctively as one entity drifted closer. "Friendly or not, I don't like how they're watching us." "Easy," Naruto cautioned. "Aggressive energy will only provoke them. Let me try communicating." He slowed his advance, then carefully directed a thin stream of golden chakra toward the nearest entity, not attacking, but offering connection. The shadow hesitated before extending a tendril of its amorphous form toward the chakra stream. Where they touched, an interesting phenomenon occurred. Tiny motes of light appeared within the shadow entity, like stars appearing in a night sky. "It's responding to the creation energy," Naruto realized. "Not consuming it, but integrating it somehow." The entity withdrew after this brief contact, rejoining its fellows in their circular observation. Gradually, their movement pattern shifted from random circling to a more purposeful configuration, aligning themselves along the path ahead like sentries or guides. "I believe they're offering safe passage," Kale said, her sensitivity to energy patterns allowing her to interpret the subtle shifts in the void entity's behavior. "Are leading us into a trap?" Caulifla countered skeptically. "No," Naruto shook his head, certain of his assessment. "They're curious about what we're doing. I sense no hostility, only expectation." Their journey continued with the void entities flanking their path, occasionally drifting closer to inspect the marker seeds Naruto placed but never interfering. The resistance of the void gradually increased until movement required significant energy expenditure, slowing their progress to what felt like a crawl despite their considerable power. 4 hours into the expedition, Vados's voice came through their communicators again, clearer this time. "You approach the primary resonance point. Prepare for initial contact." Ahead of them, barely visible in the absolute darkness, a subtle distortion appeared. Not light exactly, but a rippling in the fabric of nothingness itself. As they drew nearer, the distortion resolved into what appeared to be fragments of matter, microscopic particles drifting in a rough spherical formation approximately 20 meters in diameter. "What is that?" Caulifla asked, slowing her advance to study the phenomenon. "Remnants," Naruto replied softly, recognizing what they were seeing. "Fragments of a planet that once existed here." "Sadala," Kale whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "The Saiyan homeworld. This was its location in Universe 6. The revelation added solemn weight to their mission. These drifting particles represented not just abstract cosmic remnants but the literal dust of a civilization, the homeworld of Caulifla and Kale's people. Naruto glanced at his companions, noting Caulifla's uncharacteristically subdued expression and the glimmer of tears in Kale's eyes. This was personal for them in ways he could only partly understand. While he too had faced the destruction of his home during Pain's attack on Konoha, he'd never experienced the complete erasure of his entire world and civilization. "We're going to bring it back," he promised quietly, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Not just as a memory, but as reality." Caulifla met his gaze, something vulnerable briefly visible beneath her usual tough exterior. "You can't know that for certain. Even Vados said the restoration might not be identical to what existed before." "I know," Naruto acknowledged. "But something will exist again where now there's only dust." "That's a start." The void entities that had accompanied them now arranged themselves in a circular formation around the remnant particles. their amorphous forms pulsating in a synchronized rhythm. They're responding to the resonance point, Naruto observed. They recognize its significance. The void entities exist partially outside conventional reality. Vados explained through the communicator. They perceive echoes of what once existed and what may exist again. Your presence at this location, bringing creation energy to Ariso. Nance Point, represents a cosmic event they instinctively understand. Naruto turned to his companions. It's time. Formation Alpha, just as we practiced. The three warriors positioned themselves in a triangular formation around the drifting particles, their energy platforms expanding to form a stable base from which to work. Each began the careful process of gathering their respective energies, golden chakra, blue ki, and emerald power flowing in controlled patterns around their bodies. Primary containment, Naruto called out, compressing his chakra into a dense golden sphere between his palms. Caulifla and Kale followed suit. Their energies similarly condensed into concentrated forms. The void around them seemed to grow utterly still, even the shadow entities freezing in place as if holding their breath. Secondary circulation. Connect the triangle. Beams of energy extended between the three warriors, forming the now familiar triangular circuit. This time, however, the resistance they encountered was significantly greater than during practice sessions. The void itself seemed to push back against their attempt to establish harmony, like an immune system rejecting foreign material. Caulifla grunted with effort, sweat beading on her forehead as she fought to maintain her connection. Something's fighting us. Push through it, Naruto encouraged, increasing his chakra output to compensate. This is the void's natural resistance to creation. We need to convince it to accept our energy. Kale, surprisingly, appeared to be having the least difficulty. Her connection points with both Naruto and Caulifla flowed smoother than the direct link between them. Focus on harmony, not force, she suggested, her voice strained but controlled. Like we're asking permission, not demanding it. Naruto immediately understood and adjusted his approach, shifting from pushing his chakra through the resistance to letting it resonate with the void itself, finding complementary frequencies rather than opposing ones. Caulifla, after a moment's hesitation, followed their example, her fierce expression softening slightly as she altered her ki flow from aggressive to harmonious. The change in approach produced immediate results. The resistance diminished rapidly, allowing their energy triangle to stabilize into the necessary configuration. Final phase, convergence at center point. All three directed their combined energy toward the center of the remnant particles. Rather than forming a sphere as in their practice sessions, the harmonized energy spread throughout the particle cloud, illuminating each microscopic fragment from within. The dust of ancient Sadala began to glow with combined golden blue-green light, the particles moving with increasing speed in their orbital pattern. Now, expansion and solidification. This was the crucial step, the actual act of creation that would transform remnant dust into the seed of a new world. All three warriors made a unified gesture, extending their arms forward with palms open in offering rather than command. The illuminated particles responded dramatically, expanding outward while simultaneously attracting void matter to join their formation. The process accelerated exponentially, the growing sphere of material taking on definition and structure as fundamental cosmic principles established themselves within the creation seed. It's working, Kale exclaimed, wonder replacing strain in her voice. Before their eyes, a miniature planet took form, no larger than 100 meters in diameter, but complete with basic geological features. A core formed at the center, surrounded by mantle layers and a thin crust that already showed the beginning of terrain variation. The creation seed rotated slowly on its axis, gravitational principles establishing themselves as its mass increased. Naruto maintained focus despite his own amazement, carefully modulating his chakra input to ensure stable formation. Vados, are the cosmic geometries aligning correctly? Indeed, came the angel's voice, unusually animated. The seed has established perfect positional harmony with your island base. The first nod, of the restoration network is forming exactly as required. The void entities had begun a slow, circular dance around the newly formed miniature planet, their amorphous bodies elongating and contracting in what appeared to be celebration or acknowledgement. Far from resisting this act of creation, they now seemed to embrace it, perhaps recognizing that this restoration followed natural cosmic principles rather than arbitrary imposition. As the creation process stabilized, requiring less active input from the three warriors, Naruto finally allowed himself to fully appreciate what they had accomplished. This tiny planet, hardly more than an asteroid by normal standards, represented the first true step toward restoring an entire universe. From this seed, according to Vados's explanations, Ural cosmic expansion would gradually occur, accelerated by the additional nodes they would establish at the remaining resonance points. "We did it," he said quietly, genuine awe in his voice despite his centuries of extraordinary experiences. Caulifla landed on the small planet's surface, her boots touching down on actual solid ground where moments before there had been only void and dust. She knelt, running her fingers through the freshly formed soil with an uncharacteristically gentle touch. "Sadala," she murmured, "not as it was, maybe, but a beginning." Kale joined her, tears flowing freely now as she too made contact with this newborn fragment of their homeworld. "It feels alive, like it remembers what it once was." Naruto remained hovering above, giving the Saiyans this moment of connection with their reborn world. His role as catalyst was important, but their emotional bond to this specific resonance point represented something beyond his experience, a homecoming to a place that had ceased to exist until this very moment. The communicator at his wrist activated, Vados's voice coming through with unusual urgency. "Naruto, something unexpected is occurring at the creation seed. My instruments detect a temporal anomaly forming near your position." Instantly alert, Naruto scanned their surroundings, extending his sage-enhanced senses to detect any disturbance. "What kind of anomaly?" "Hostile. Unknown," Vados replied. "The readings suggest a localized time distortion, as if the temporal properties of the void are reacting to the creation energy in unforeseen ways." Before Naruto could warn his companions, the space directly above the miniature planet rippled visibly, reality itself seeming to fold inward before expanding outward like the opening of an invisible flower. From within this distortion emerged a figure unlike anything they had encountered before. Humanoid in general shape but clearly not human, the being stood approximately 2 meters tall, with crystalline skin that reflected light in hypnotic patterns. Where eyes should have been, concentric rings of glowing symbols constantly shifted and rearranged themselves. Instead of hair, tendrils, L-like appendages floated around its head, each ending in what appeared to be a miniature astronomical instrument. Most striking was the book clutched against its chest, a massive tome bound in material that seemed to shift between solid matter and pure energy, its pages visibly turning themselves despite the being's arms remaining wrapped protectively around its cover. Caulifla and Kale immediately moved into defensive positions, energy flaring around their hands as they prepared for potential combat. Naruto, however, held up his hand in a restraining gesture. His senses detected no malevolence from this strange entity. Only intense curiosity and something akin to scholarly excitement. "Who are you?" Naruto asked directly, remaining poised for action but not overtly threatening. The crystalline being tilted its head, the symbol eyes spinning rapidly before settling into a new configuration. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonic overtones, as if multiple voices were speaking in perfect synchronization. "I am Hitomi of the Chronomancers, keeper of the cosmic archives." The being's head tilted further, studying Naruto with obvious fascination. "You are unexpected. A creation nexus forming where cosmic erasure was absolute. Most irregular. Most fascinating. Chronomancers?" Naruto questioned, maintaining a cautious distance. "Timekeepers," the being, Hitomi, explained, gesturing with one crystalline hand while the other remained firmly attached to her book. "We observe and record the flow of universal history across all 12 universes. Or rather, we did, until Universe 6 was erased and my physical form with it." Understanding dawned on Naruto. "You're another survivor, like Caulifla and Kale." "Not precisely," Hitomi corrected. "My consciousness persisted within the archives, which exist partially outside conventional spacetime. When your creation seed formed, it provided sufficient material anchor for me to reconstitute my observational form." He turned her attention to the miniature planet beneath them. "This is remarkable. You've utilized harmonic energy convergence to re-establish fundamental cosmic principles within the void." "Such method Ology is unprecedented in 18.7 billion years of recorded universal history. Caulifla, growing impatient with the academic discussion, stepped forward. If you're from Universe 6, then you know what happened to it. Can you help us restore it properly? Hitomi's symbol eyes reconfigured themselves into what might have been an expression of thoughtfulness. Restoration following erasure is not documented in the archives. However, she opened her massive book, pages flipping rapidly of their own accord before settling on a specific section. The remnant particles you have reconstituted contain memory imprints of their original configuration. With proper stimulation, these memories could theoretically guide the restoration process toward greater fidelity to the original Universe 6. Memory imprints? Kale asked, confusion evident in her voice. All matter retains impressions of its previous states, Hitomi explained. Like grooves worn into stone by running water. These impressions are usually too subtle to detect or utilize, but in this unique circumstance, with void physics and creation energy interacting, they become accessible. Naruto's mind raced with the implications. Re-saying these remnant particles remember what they once were, and with the right approach, we could help them return to that form. Precisely. Hitomi's voice contained the first hint of emotion. A note of approval at his quick understanding. As keeper of the archives, I have detailed records of Universe 6's original configuration. Combined with the memory imprints in the remnant particles, W.E. could potentially achieve up to 87.3% restoration fidelity. Hope surged through all three warriors. This was far more than they had dared expect when embarking on this mission, not just creating new matter in place of what was lost, but potentially recovering much of what had originally existed. Vados, Naruto called through the communicator. Are you getting this? Can you confirm what Hitomi is suggesting? After a moment of silence, Vados's voice responded, tinged with what might have been surprise. The chronomancer's analysis appears sound, though I had not considered the possibility of accessing particle memory imprints. Angels observe cosmic law rather than manipulate it directly. Such methodology would not occur to us naturally. But is it possible? Caulifla pressed. Could we actually bring back people, civilizations, the way they were? Theoretically, Vados acknowledged cautiously. Though the process would be extraordinarily complex and would require precise application of both creation energy and temporal manipulation. All eyes turned to Hitomi, who clutched her archives closer to her crystalline chest. I possess the knowledge but lack the necessary energy manipulation capabilities. My function is observation and recording, not creation. That's where we come in, Naruto stated confidently. Between my chakra, their ki, and your knowledge, we have everything we need to make this work. Hitomi studied him with renewed intensity, her symbol eyes spinning through countless configurations before settling. You are optimistic despite insufficient data. Fascinating. Most sentient beings require greater certainty before committing to courses of action with universal implications. Naruto laughed, the sound strangely comforting in the vastness of the void. If I waited for absolute certainty before taking action, I'd never have accomplished anything worthwhile in my life. A philosophical position with intriguing practical applications, Hitomi observed. Very well, I shall contribute my knowledge to this unprecedented endeavor. With that declaration, their unlikely alliance gained a new member, one whose encyclopedic knowledge of Universe 6's original state might prove the key to true restoration rather than mere recreation. The return journey to their island sanctuary proceeded much faster than the outbound trip, the pathway marked by Naruto's chakra seeds providing a stable route that faced minimal resistance from the void. Hitomi accompanied them, her crystalline form gliding effortlessly through the darkness while She continuously consulted her ever-shifting archives. Upon their arrival, Vados awaited them, her expression betraying unusual interest as she observed the chronomancer. Keeper Hitomi, your species as thought lost even before Universe 6 erasure. The last recorded chronomancer observation post went dormant over 50,000 years ago. Hitomi inclined her head in acknowledgement. Our physical manifestations became unnecessary as our consciousness merged more fully with the archives. I am the last to maintain a corporeal form, specifically to serve as interface with other sentient species when required. Your records will prove invaluable, Vados acknowledged. Though I must caution against overconfidence. The laws governing universal erasure and restoration are absolute, even with your knowledge. There will be limitations to what can be recovered. Understood. Naruto nodded, leading the group toward the command center where they could properly integrate Hitomi's information with their existing plans. But even partial recovery is better than starting completely from scratch. Inside the command center, Hitomi placed her massive archives on the central table, the book adjusting its size to fit perfectly within the circular space. Its pages continued turning of their own accord, displaying complex multidimensional diagrams, mathematical equations, and what appeared to be Kale records in a script none of them recognized. The archives contain complete topographical, biological, cultural, and historical data for all 12 universes, Hitomi explained, her crystalline fingers hovering over the pages without quite touching them. For Universe 6 specifically, I maintain detailed mapping down to individual continental formations on 7,832 primary inhabited worlds. Kale searched for words, clearly overwhelmed by the scope. A lot of bedtime reading, Caulifla finished dryly, though her eyes betrayed keen interest as she peered at the shifting pages. Hitomi's symbol eyes reconfigured in what might have been amusement. Indeed, however, our immediate concern is not comprehensive restoration but strategic implementation. We must identify which resonance points will provide maximum expansion effect when stimulated with creation energy. According to Vados's map, the 12 brightest points correspond to the core worlds of Universe 6, Naruto recalled. Retrieving the diagrams he had prepared before their expedition. We've established the first at Sadala's coordinates. Which should be our next priority? Hitomi consulted the archives, page flipping rapidly before settling on what appeared to be a star chart of incredible complexity. The resonance points exist in harmonic relationship to one another. Having established the primary point, the secondary activations must follow specific sequential patterns to maintain cosmic stability. Her crystalline finger traced a path between glowing points on the diagram. This node, corresponding to the planet Namek in your terminology, should be our next target. Its relationship to Sadala creates a foundational axis around which the universal geometry can properly align. Namek, Caulifla frowned. Why not one of the more developed core worlds? Cosmic reconstruction follows natural principles rather than cultural significance, Vados explained. Namek's positioning within the original Universe 6 made it a key junction point for energy flow patterns. Naruto studied the diagram thoughtfully. If we're establishing these creation seeds in sequence, perhaps we should divide our efforts now. The first seed is stable and growing. Hitomi confirmed it's already expanded to several kilometers in diameter since we left. With her knowledge of the exact coordinates and necessary energy configurations, we could potentially work on multiple seeds simultaneously. A logical proposal, Hitomi agreed, though not without risk. The harmonic relationship between seeds must be precisely maintained. Deviation of even 0.003% from optimal configuration could result in unstable expansion patterns. Then we need perfect coordination, Naruto decided. Vados, with your permission, I'd like to try something that might help. The angel raised an eyebrow questioningly but nodded her assent. Naruto formed a familiar hand seal, channeling chakra in a specific pattern. Sage art. Cosmic connection. Golden chakra spread from his body, forming a web-like network that extended throughout the command center before coalescing into glowing orbs that hovered near each person present. The orbs pulsed gently, each synchronized perfectly with its assigned individual's energy signature. These chakra nodes will allow us to maintain perfect communication and energy synchronization even across vast distances. Naruto explained. I've modified my standard telepathic link technique to incorporate the cosmic principles Vados and Hitomi have shown us. Cautiously, Caulifla reached out to touch the blue-tinged orb hovering near her shoulder. As her fingers made contact, her eyes widened in surprise. I can feel, all of you. Your energy signatures, your positions relative to mine. The nodes create a quantum entanglement effect, Hitomi observed, studying her own crystalline patterned orb with fascination. Most impressive adaptation of biological energy manipulation. The archives contain no record of similar techniques. This could work, Vados acknowledged, her own orb floating serenely beside her staff. With this connection, you could theoretically establish multiple creation seeds while maintaining harmonic alignment. Then let's revise our strategy, Naruto suggested. Instead of moving as a single group, we form two teams, each responsible for establishing specific nodes according to the harmonic sequence Hitomi has identified. The planning session that followed lasted hours, with Hitomi consulting the archives for precise coordinates and energy requirements while Naruto refined his connection technique to ensure it would function across the vast distances involved. By the time they had finished, a comprehensive strategy had emerged, one that would dramatically accelerate their universe restoration project if successful. Team 1 would consist of Naruto and Kale, focusing on the Namek resonance point and subsequent nodes in the Eastern harmonic sequence. Team 2 would comprise Caulifla and Hitomi, addressing the Western sequence beginning with the planet Vados identified as Frost Demon Prime, homeworld of the species exemplified by warriors like Frost. This approach should allow us to establish 6 additional creation seeds within approximately 1/3 the time it would take working as a single unit, Hitomi calculated, her symbol EY spinning through numerical configurations. Assuming optimal performance and no unexpected variables. There are always unexpected variables, Naruto noted with a wry smile. But adaptability is our strength. As the planning session concluded and they prepared for a rest period before launching their ambitious dual-team approach, Caulifla pulled Naruto aside in the corridor outside the command center. "You're taking Kale with you," she observed, her tone carefully neutral despite the intensity in her eyes. Naruto nodded. The Eastern harmonic sequence involves more delicate energy balance requirements. Kale's control and sensitivity make her ideal for that approach. Caulifla studied him for a long moment, arms crossed over her chest. "You've been helping her with her berserker form. I've noticed the difference in her control. She's a quick learner," Naruto replied honestly. "And her situation reminds me of my own struggles with Kurama's power when I was younger. Sometimes it helps to have guidance from someone who's walked a similar path." Something in Caulifla's expression softened marginally. "She trusts you. That doesn't come easily for her." "I know," Naruto acknowledged quietly. "I don't take that responsibility lightly." "Good," Caulifla nodded sharply. "Because if you did anything to break that trust, your fancy chakra techniques wouldn't save you from what I'd do in response." Despite the threatening words, Naruto detected the underlying concern. Not jealousy exactly, but protective loyalty toward someone Caulifla clearly cared deeply about. "Understood," he replied simply. "I promise to keep her safe." Caulifla held his gaze a moment longer before the intensity in her eyes shifted to something more calculating. "Just remember that I'll be expecting a full training exchange when we regroup. Any special techniques you're teaching her, I expect to learn too." With that parting remark, halfway between demand and request, she turned and strode away, leaving Naruto with the distinct impression that he'd just navigated a conversational minefield without fully understanding all the explosives involved. "She's marking territory," Kurama observed with amusement in Naruto's mind. "Though I'm not entirely sure if she's being protective of Kale or establishing her own claim to your attention." "Or both," Naruto murmured thoughtfully. "Saiyan relationships seem complicated." "No more so than human ones," Kurama replied. "Just more direct in their expression of dominance hierarchies." Naruto shook his head with a small smile and continued toward his quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in their universe restoration project, and he needed rest before attempting something no mortal had ever done before, deliberately creating cosmic structure from remnant particles and memory imprints. The void appeared different from their island sanctuary now, less absolute in its emptiness, more textured with subtle variations that hadn't been visible before. Whether this represented actual change or simply their growing sensitivity to its nature remained unclear, but all agreed that something fundamental was shifting in the nothingness surrounding them. The two teams stood at the island's edge, final preparations complete as they prepared to embark on their separate missions. The connection orbs Naruto had created hovered steadily beside each member, pulsing in perfect synchronization. "Remember," Vados cautioned from where she stood observing their departure, "the harmonic relationship between creation seeds must be maintained precisely. Any deviation could result in unstable expansion patterns." All 4 expedition members recited in unison, having heard the warning repeatedly during planning. The angel's lips quirked slightly upward. "Indeed. Safe travels," universe builders. With final nods to each other, the teams set off in different directions, Naruto and Kale heading toward what Univers. Al maps had once labeled the Eastern Quadrant, while Caulifla and Hitomi departed for the Western Quadrant. Naruto glanced sideways at his companion as they established their traveling rhythm, creating sequential platforms of chakra and ki to propel themselves through the void. Kale moved with surprising grace despite her reserved nature, her green energy flowing in efficient patterns that suggested growing confidence in her abilities. "How are you feeling about this mission?" he asked as they placed marker seeds behind them, establishing their return path. Kale considered the question before answering. A habit Naruto had noticed and appreciated, she never spoke without thought. Nervous, excited, responsible. It's strange to think we're literally rebuilding a universe. When you put it that way, it does sound a bit overwhelming, Naruto admitted with a chuckle. But not to you, Kale observed perceptively. You've faced impossible challenges before. This is just another mountain to climb. Naruto raised an eyebrow, surprised by her insight. That's pretty accurate, actually. Throughout my life, I've repeatedly encountered situations that seemed hopeless at first glance. The scale might be different here, but the principle remains the same. Identify what needs to be done, then do it step by step without getting paralyzed by the enormity of the task. Kale nodded, a small smile forming. That's what I admire about you. Your certainty, not arrogance, but conviction. The simple compliment caught Naruto off guard, warmth spreading through his chest at her sincere words. During their weeks of training together, Kale had gradually opened up, revealing intelligence and perception that her initial shyness had masked. Her quiet observations often contained deeper insight than Caulifla's more forceful declarations. "Thank you," he replied, matching her sincerity. "Though I should admit that conviction doesn't always mean I know exactly what I'm doing. Half the time I'm figuring things out as I go." That drew a soft laugh from her, a sound still rare enough to feel like a victory when elicited. "That's even more impressive, then." Their conversation fell into comfortable silence as they continued through the void, conserving energy for the long journey ahead. The connection orbs maintained steady pulsing, occasionally flaring brighter when Caulifla sent a status update through the network. Several hours into their journey, void entities began appearing around them, similar to those they'd encountered on the first expedition, but behaving differently. Rather than merely observing, these shadows actively approached, extending tendrils toward the chakra seeds Naruto placed as markers. "They're interacting with the creation energy," Naruto noted, lowering his pace to observe the phenomenon. Kale stopped beside him, watching as a particularly bold entity wrapped itself partially around a seed, seemingly absorbing minute amounts of energy without consuming the seed itself. They're feeding on it, she realized. But sustainably, like taking nectar from a flower without killing the plant. Symbiosis rather than predation, Naruto agreed. Void is adapting to creation energy rather than simply resisting it. This development supported their broader theory, that universal restoration need not fight against the void but could work with it. Establishing new patterns that honored existing cosmic principles rather than overriding them forcefully. They resumed their journey with renewed optimism, the void entities now flanking their path like curious escorts rather than wary observers. As they approached what their calculations indicated should be the Namek resonance point, the number of entities increased dramatically, forming concentric rings around a specific region of emptiness that appeared identical to the surrounding void to normal perception. "They know something's here," Naruto observed, extending his sage senses to probe the area. "I can feel it too, a different quality to the nothingness, like an echo or a shadow of what once existed." Kale closed her eyes, focusing her own energy sensitivity. "Yes, it's like hearing a melody so faint you're not sure if you're imagining it." They positioned themselves within the circle of void entities, establishing stable platforms from which to begin the creation process. Unlike at Sadala's coordinates, they couldn't form a triangle with just two people, requiring a modified approach Hitomi had helped them develop. "Creation matrix. Dual harmony," Naruto announced, forming complex hand seals as golden chakra flowed from his core. Kale mirrored his movements with variations specific to key manipulation, her emerald energy rising to match his golden output. The connection orbs between them flared brightly, compensating for the absence of a third point in their formation by creating a resonance feedback loop. Golden chakra and green key spiraled together, forming a double helix pattern that expanded outward from their position. Where the energies touched the void at precisely the resonance point coordinates, minute particles began to illuminate, even fewer than had been present at Sadala's location, but responding similarly to stimulation. Phase 1 complete, Naruto confirmed, maintaining steady chakra output as sweat beaded on his forehead. Moving to Phase 2, memory imprint activation. Quote, this represented the true test of Hitomi's theory, that remnant particles contained impressions of their original state which could guide reconstruction. Naru, to channel the specific frequency of chakra developed through careful study of the archives, while Kale focused her ki into complementary patterns. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The illuminated particles continued their slow orbital dance without apparent change. Kale's expression betrayed growing concern as her energy output remained steady but the expected reaction failed to materialize. It's not working, she whispered, careful to maintain her ki flow despite her doubt. Wait, Naruto encouraged, complete confidence in his voice. Sometimes resonance takes time to build. Keep the pattern stable. As if responding to his faith, the particles suddenly shifted, their orbital pattern accelerating while simultaneously attracting void matter to join their configuration. The process mirrored what they'd witnessed at Sadala but with subtle differences in the emerging structure. It's working, Kale exclaimed, genuine joy breaking through her usual reserve. Before their eyes, another miniature planet took form, different from Sadala in its composition, showing more blue-green coloration as features emerged from the coalescing matter. Unlike the primarily rocky terrain of the Saiyan homeworld seed, this nascent planet developed what appeared to be vast liquid surfaces interspersed with unusual rounded landmasses. Namek, Naruto breathed, recognizing the emerging geography from Hitomi's archives. It's reforming according to its original pattern. The connection orb at his shoulder pulsed urgently, transmitting Caulifla's voice through their link. They reached Frost Demon Prime coordinates and begun implementation. Status report, Namek seed forming successfully, Naruto replied, maintaining concentration on the creation process. Memory imprint activation confirmed effective. Void entities providing non-interference. Same here, Caulifla reported, unusual excitement in her typically gruff tone. These shadow things are actually helping. Somehow. Directing remnant particles toward the formation point. Hitomi says it's unprecedented behavior. The implications were significant. Void entities actively participating in restoration rather than merely tolerating it suggested a fundamental shift in the cosmic balance they were establishing. As Namek's creation seed stabilized, requiring less active input to maintain growth, Naruto and Kale prepared to move on to their next designated coordinates. Before departing, however, Naruto created specialized chakra constructs around the fledgling planet, sensors that would monitor its expanse. Ion and alert them to any irregularities. 2 down, 10 to go, he noted with satisfaction as they set course for their next target. At this rate, we could establish all 12 core world seeds within days rather than weeks. Kale nodded, though her expression had grown thoughtful. I've been wondering, if planets can reform from memory imprints, what about living beings? People, animals, plants. Could they potentially reform as well? The question cut to the heart of their most profound hope, not just rebuilding cosmic structures but truly restoring the trillions of lives erased from existence. Hitomi and Vados both indicated it's theoretically possible, Naruto replied carefully. Living beings leave stronger imprints than inanimate matter due to the complexity of their energy patterns. But whether those imprints contain enough information for complete restoration, including consciousness and memories. He left the sentence unfinished, unwilling to offer false hope yet equally unwilling to dismiss the possibility. I understand, Kale said softly. It's too early to know for certain. Naruto placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, offering comfort through the simple contact. What I do know is that every step we take creates more possibility than existed before. Where there was nothing, now there are seeds of worlds. That alone is worth celebrating. She nodded, drawing strength from his optimism as they continued their journey through the gradually changing void. Over the following days, measured by the artificial cycles they maintained through their On action orbs, both teams established creation seeds at their designated coordinates with increasing efficiency. What had taken hours of concentrated effort at Sadala now required barely 30 minutes. As they refined their techniques and the void itself grew more receptive to restoration energy. The network of creation seeds expanded according to the cosmic geometry Vados and Hitomi had mapped. Each new point strengthening the overall structure of the emerging universe. Monitoring data transmitted back to their island sanctuary confirmed that the seeds were growing steadily. Sadala had already expanded to nearly planetary size, while newer seeds developed at accelerated rates influenced by the established harmonic network. When both teams finally returned to their base after completing their assigned coordinates, the change in the surrounding void was dramatic. Where once absolute darkness had stretched in all directions, now distant points of light were visible, the growing creation seeds illuminating the nothingness with promising radiance. 12 core world seeds established and expanding at optimal rates, Hitomi reported during their reunion briefing, her symbol eyes displaying numerical data directly. Connective tissue forming between nodes at 127% of projected efficiency. Universal framework restoration currently at 3.7% completion and accelerating exponentially. In less technical terms, Vados translated with unusual animation in her voice, "You've successfully initiated the restoration of Universe 6 on a scale I would have considered impossible for mortal beings to achieve." Coming from the typically reserved angel, this constituted extraordinary praise. The four universe builders exchanged glances of tired but profound satisfaction, even Caulifla Alawi ing a genuine smile to replace her usual smirk. The void entity's participation was the key accelerating factor, Naruto observed, reviewing the data from their expeditions. Once they recognized the harmonic pattern we were establishing, they actively contributed to the process. Indeed, Hitomi agreed. The archives contain no previous record of void entities exhibiting cooperative behavior with creation energy. This represents an entirely new paradigm in cosmic reconstruction theory. So what's next? Caulifla asked, characteristically focused on action rather than theory. We've established the core worlds. But that's still just 12 planets in an entire universe. The next phase is exponential expansion, Vados explained, using her staff to project a three-dimensional model of their progress. The 12 seeds will function as foundational anchors from which natural cosmic formation will proceed. Secondary worlds will develop along harmonic lines connecting the primary nodes, following the original universal geometry. How long before we see substantial results? Kale inquired. At current expansion rates, Hitomi calculated, consulting the archives, approximatal. Why 42.7% of Universe 6's original volume should be restored within 6 months, with full spatial restoration achievable within 2 years. And the content of that space? Naruto asked the critical question. Planets, stars, living beings. Quote, here both Vados and Hitomi grew more cautious in their assessments. Cosmic structures with strong memory imprints should reform with relatively high fidelity, Hitomi explained. Major celestial bodies, distinctive geographical features, potentially even flora with simple genetic structures. However, more complex organisms represent a greater challenge. Vados continued when the chronomancer hesitated. The memory imprints of sentient beings in particular involve intricacies beyond mere physical structure, consciousness, personality, individual memories. The implication hung heavy in the air. Their efforts might successfully restore the physical universe, but its inhabitants, the countless civilizations that had populated Universe 6, remained a far more uncertain prospect. Naruto refused to accept this limitation without exploration. The creation seeds have already demonstrated properties beyond what you initially thought possible. There must be a way to enhance the restoration of living beings specifically. Perhaps, Vados acknowledged, though such methodology would require innovations beyond established cosmic principles. Fortunately, Naruto smiled, innovation is something of a specialty among mortals. We're not constrained by cosmic law the way higher beings might be. This observation drew thoughtful looks from Bot, Vados and Hitomi, as if the concept of mortals developing solutions that circumvented divine limitations represented a fascinating possibility neither had fully considered before. The archives might offer relevant historical precedents, Hitomi suggested, her crystalline fingers already turning pages in her massive book. There are records of consciousness transfer methods, memory crystal technology, and various soul manipulation techniques developed by ancient civilizations before they were deemed too dangerous and restricted by divine edict. Wait, Caulifla interrupted, zeroing in on a critical point. Restricted by divine edict, are we talking about breaking cosmic laws here? Vados tapped her staff gently on the floor, drawing their attention. Not breaking, precisely. Rather, operating within unexplored interpretations. The erasure and subsequent restoration of an entire universe represents an unprecedented situation. Certain restrictions may be contextually flexible under these extraordinary circumstances. Quote, the careful phrasing suggested Vados was navigating delicate territory, perhaps offering more leeway than her position would typically allow while maintaining plausible deniability should higher authorities question her involvement. Then let's focus our next efforts on developing methodologies specifically for enhancing living being restoration, Naruto proposed. Hitomi can research historical precedents in the archives, while we continue maintaining and monitoring the existing creation seed network. Agreement came readily from all parties. The Shah red goal of true restoration, not just of cosmic structures but of life itself, uniting their diverse perspectives and abilities. As the meeting concluded and they dispersed to their respective tasks, Naruto found himself approached by Caulifla in one of the island's quieter gardens, an area he'd created specifically for meditation and reflection. You've been avoiding me since we got back, she stated without preamble. Arms crossed over her chest in her characteristic confrontational stance. Naruto blinked in genuine surprise. I haven't been avoiding you. We've been in meetings together for the past several hours. You know what I mean, she pressed. You promised to share all the special training techniques you've been teaching Kale. So far, nothing. Understanding dawned. Ah, that. I assumed you'd want to rest after the expedition before starting new training. Saiyans don't need much recovery time, she informed him with a hint of pride. And I want to know exactly what you've been teaching her about controlling energy flow. Naruto studied her for a moment, recognizing the complexity beneath her demanding exterior. Caulifla masked vulnerability with aggression, genuine curiosity with competitive challenge. Where Kale's insecurities manifested as shyness, Caulifla's emerged as confrontational assertions of capability. The techniques aren't secrets, he replied calmly. I'd be happy to show you everything I've shared with Kale. Though I should mention that our training has been specifically focused on harmonizing dual nature energy, helping her berserker form integrate with her base form rather than existing in opposition. Caulifla's expression shifted subtly. And you think I don't have application for that? That my energy is somehow simpler? Not at all, Naruto corrected quickly. Every warrior has internal conflicts to harmonize. The specific techniques might need adaptation for your unique energy signature and fighting style, but the principles apply universally. This seemed to satisfy her, though she maintained her challenging posture. Good. When do we start? Now works for me, Naruto offered with a smile. I've developed a new chakra circulation technique that might help you maintain power output while reducing energy leakage during intense combat. It's something I noticed during our expedition. Your ki tends to flare beyond necessary parameters when you're pushing your limits. The observation was technical rather than critical, but Caulifla's competitive nature immediately engaged. Are you saying I waste energy? I'm saying you have room for efficiency improvement, just like everyone, Naruto clarified diplomatically. Including me. That's why training never ends, no matter how powerful you become. To demonstrate his sincerity, he created a shadow clone that immediately began performing a complex chakra control exercise, golden energy flowing through intricate patterns around its body with precise control. TS is an advanced technique I'm still mastering myself, he explained. Perfect energy recirculation without loss during high-output combat situations. It's challenging even after years of practice. The demonstration of his own continued learning seemed to resonate with Caulifla. Her defensive posture relaxed slightly as she watched the clone's energy patterns with genuine interest. Show me, she demanded. Though the words carried enthusiasm rather than mere challenge now. For the next several hours, they trained together intensively, Naruto demonstrating chakra circulation principles while Caulifla adapted them to her ki manipulation with remarkable creativity. Her natural talent for combat techniques allowed her to grasp concepts quickly, though the finer control aspects required and repetition that occasionally tested her tolerance for methodical practice. Slow, precise movements build the neural pathways, Naruto explained as she growled in frustration after a failed attempt at the recirculation pattern. Speed comes later, after the pattern is internalized. Saiyans learn through intensity, she countered, wiping sweat from her brow. High-pressure situations force evolutionary adaptation. Then let's combine approaches, Naruto suggested. Master the basic pattern through slow repetition, then apply pressure to force adaptive improvement. To demonstrate, he created 3 shadow clones that surrounded Caulifla in triangular formation. Maintain the circulation pattern while defending against random attacks. The clones will start slow and increase speed as you improve. This challenge immediately engaged her Saiyan instincts, learning through combat rather than abstract practice. As the clones began their coordinated assault, Caulifla's concentration visibly intensified. Her ki circulation pattern stabilizing as she simultaneously defended against multiple opponents. Naruto observed with growing admiration as she adapted the technique to her unique UE fighting style, modifying his chakra principles to enhance rather than reshape her natural ki expression. Where Kale benefited from careful, meditative approaches to energy control, Caulifla thrived under pressure. Her progress accelerating when framed as combat enhancement rather than technical exercise. You're a natural, he acknowledged as she successfully maintained perfect energy circulate ion while dispatching all 3 clones with precise strikes. You've already modified the technique to better suit Saiyan ki flow. Caulifla straightened, breathing heavily but with evident satisfaction. Your chakra principles have interesting applications for ki manipulation. Different foundation, similar optimization potential. Coming from her, this represented significant acknowledgement of value. Naruto recognized the offered respect and returned it in kind. Your adaptations could improve my own approach, he noted. The way you incorporated the circulation pattern into offensive streaks instead of treating them as separate systems, that's something I hadn't fully explored. The exchange of genuine respect shifted the dynamic between them subtly, competition remaining but now balanced with mutual recognition of value. As they continued training into the evening, sharing techniques and insights from their respective traditions, Caulifla gradually revealed more about her past, her self-taught mastery of ki, her reputation among Universe 6 Saiyans, her discovery of Kale's potential when others had dismissed her. In turn, Naruto shared stories of his own journey, from isolated child to respected Hokage. The mentors who had guided him, the rivals who had pushed him to grow, the friends who had believed in him before he fully believed in himself. So this Sasuke guy was basically your version of me, Caulifla observed with characteristic directness as they finally paused for rest, sitting on the edge of the training ground overlooking the nighttime landscape of their island. Naruto laughed, surprised by the comparison yet recognizing its partial truth. In some ways, maybe. The rivalry, the competing philosophies, pushing each other to improve, but your goals are very different from his. How so? She asked, genuine curiosity overcoming her usual disinterest in others' assessments. Sasuke's path was driven by trauma and revenge for a long time, Naruto explained. His expression growing thoughtful, he sought power primarily as a means to destructive ends, though he eventually found a better way. You seek strength for its own sake, the pure challenge of becoming better, stronger, more capable. There's something much healthier in that approach. Caulifla absorbed this analysis with unusual quiet, her gaze directed toward the artificial stars Naruto created to complete their island's night sky illusion. It wasn't always that simple, she finally said, her voice losing some of its habitual edge. In Universe 6, Saiyans evolved differently than their Universe 7 counterparts. Less conquering, more cooperation. But the drive to be strongest remained our core value. Those who couldn't keep up were left behind. She glanced sideways at Naruto. That's why Kale was important. She had more potential than anyone, but the traditional Saiyan methods were wrong for her. Our training system would have discarded her as weak when she was actually He strongest among us, just in a way our society didn't recognize. The insight into Caulifla's protective relationship with Kale added depth to Naruto's understanding of both women. What had initial, why appeared as simple mentorship contained layers of rebellion against cultural norms, recognition of value others missed, and genuine care masked by tough exterior. You saw what others couldn't, Naruto observed. That takes a special kind of vision. Caulifla shrugged, though the casual gesture didn't fully disguise her appreciation of his understanding. I just hate seeing potential wasted. Especially when it's because of stupid rules that don't make sense. A sentiment I'm very familiar with, Naruto agreed with a smile. Half my life has been spent proving people wrong about what's possible when you ignore arbitrary limitations. This commonality between them, recognition and nurturing of overlooked potential, rejection of artificial constraints, formed a new connection point, a value transcending their different origins and approaches. As silence settled comfortably between them, Naruto became aware of subtle shifts in Caulifla's energy signature, minute fluctuations suggesting internal consideration rather than the decisive certainty she typically projected. Something on your mind, he prompted gently. She remained quiet for another moment before responding with uncharacteristic hesitation. This universe restoration project, if it works the way we hope, if people start returning as their planets reform, what happens to you? The question caught Naruto by surprise, not the content itself, which he had certainly considered, but that it would come from Caulifla in this manner. You mean, do I return to my original world? He clarified. She nodded. Our gaze still fixed on the artificial stars overhead rather than meeting his eyes. I don't know, Naruto answered honestly. When this all started, getting back to Konoha was my primary goal. Now, the situation has grown more complex. Because you feel responsible for seeing the restoration through, Caulifla suggested, still not looking at him. Partly, Naruto acknowledged, but also because, connections have formed that I didn't anticipate. This place, this mission, the people involved, none of it was part of my life before, but now it's significant. Important. The admission hung in the air between them, neither a commitment to stay nor a declaration of departure, but recognition that the question had grown beyond simple logistics to involve emotional considerations as well. Caulifla finally turned to face him directly, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable despite her attempt to maintain casual indifference. Just wondering, for planning purposes, if we're going to keep developing these combined techniques, I need to know how long my training partner plans to stick around. The transparent excuse for a much more personal question brought a warm smile to Naruto's face. I'm not going anywhere until Universe 6 is properly restored. After that, well, we'll have plenty of time to figure out what comes next. This answer seemed to satisfy her, or at least provide sufficient reassurance for the moment. She nodded once, decisively, as if concluding a formal agreement rather than an emotionally nuanced conversation. Good, because I'm not done learning everything you know yet, and I have plenty to teach you about proper Saiyan combat techniques too. The return to her more familiar confident assertion signaled the end of the vulnerable moment, though. Something had undeniably shifted between them, a deepening of trust, understanding, and perhaps something more that neither was quite ready to name directly. As they rose to return to their respective quarters, Caulifla paused briefly. Tomorrow I want to see exactly what you've been teaching Kale about her berserker form. All of it, no holding back the advanced stuff. Deal, Naruto agreed easily. Though you might find some of it surprisingly philosophical rather than technical. I can handle philosophy, she declared with renewed bravado. As long as it leads to practical power application. Naruto laughed, genuine affection coloring the sound. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, Caulifla. As they parted ways under the artificial stars, neither fully acknowledged the connection that had formed during their training session and subsequent conversation, a foundation of mutual respect gradually evolving into something deeper and more complex. But both felt its presence, a subtle warmth that lingered long after they had returned to the solitude of their separate quarters. Somewhere in the distant reaches of the forming Universe 6, beyond the furthest creation seed yet established. A disturbance rippled through the void. Unlike the harmonious expansion of Naruto's restoration network, this disturbance moved counter to the natural cosmic flow, a deliberate contradiction of the emerging universal geometry. At the center of this anomaly floated a being of indistinct form, sometimes appearing humanoid, other times stretching and distorting into configurations that defied conventional perception. Only the eyes remained constant, ancient, calculating eyes that observed the distant points of light representing creation seeds with intense interest. Fascinating, the entity murmured, its voice containing multiple overlapping tones as if speaking from several temporal positions simultaneously. Mortals reconstructing what gods destroyed. How delightfully unprecedented. With a gesture that bent space rather than merely traversing it, the entity extracted what appeared to be a clockwork mechanism from the void itself, a complex device of innumerable gears, springs, and pendulums that moved in patterns suggesting measurement of something far more complex than standard time. The pattern is flawed, the entity observed, studying both the device and the distant creation seeds. Beautiful in its mortal improvisation, yet fundamentally unstable at quantum temporal intersections. This requires intervention. Another gesture collapsed the clockwork. RK device back into nothingness as the entity's form stabilized into something more definitively humanoid, tall and regal, clothed in garments that shifted between solid material and liquid chronology. Adorned with symbols of authority from civilizations long extinct. A new universal cycle forming without proper divine oversight, Lord Epic mused, a smile spreading across features that seemed to exist in multiple age states simultaneously. Such an opportunity comes once in eternity, if that. With purposeful deliberation, he extended his hand toward the nearest creation seed, still thousands of light years distant by conventional measurement but connected through cosmic principles that transcended simple space. A small adjustment here, he murmured as chronological energy flowed from his fingertips. Invisible to normal perception but causing subtle ripples in the universal expansion pattern. A minor redirection there, nothing to alarm the builders immediately, but laying groundwork for greater refinements. The changes he implemented were indeed subtle, alterations to temporal flow patterns that would only manifest significant effects after substantial universal expansion had occurred. By then, the modifications would be too thoroughly integrated into the cosmic structure to easily correct. Continue your admirable work, Golden Healer, Lord Epic addressed the distant Naruto as if they were having a direct conversation despite the vast separation. Build your universe according to mortal vision. I shall simply perfect what you create. With that declaration of intent, he faded from conventional perception, not departing but shifting into a temporal frequency that rendered him invisible to all but the most sensitive cosmic observers. From this vantage point, he could monitor and influence the restoration project while remaining undetected by its well-meaning architects. The game of universal restructuring had begun, with pieces being positioned for a cosmic contest whose rules remained known only to the ancient time manipulator himself. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Echoes Between Worlds. The newly formed cosmic network pulsed with life. 12 creation seeds, carefully positioned according to precise harmonic principles, had expanded beyond all initial projections. What had begun as miniature planetoids now approached proper planetary scale, their rowing gravitational influence drawing additional void matter into increasingly complex orbital patterns. Naruto stood at the edge of their island sanctuary, watching distant points of light that represented their creation seeds. Each glowed with a distinctive color signature, Sadala's deep amber, Namek's vibrant green, Frost Demon Prime's cold blue, visible even across vast cosmic distances thanks to the network's quantum entanglement properties. It's beautiful, came Kale's soft voice as she joined him at the observation point. She had taken to wearing her hair differently lately, pulled back. Kay in a simple braid that revealed more of her face, a subtle yet significant change that spoke of growing confidence. More than beautiful, Naruto agreed. It's alive. The universe is healing itself using our seeds as foundation points. The metaphor was increasingly accurate. Rather than needing to manually construct each element of the restored universe, they had discovered that the creation seeds functioned as catalysts, cosmic focal points that attracted remnant particles and void matter, organizing them according to memory imprints contained within the original fragments. The universe was, in a very real sense, remembering its original form and reconstructing itself with minimal intervention required. Hitomi says the restoration percentage has reached nearly 12%, Kale reported. Much faster than her original calculations predicted. The void entities are the key factor there, Naruto observed. Their participation accelerates everything. It's as if they've adopted our project as their own. Indeed, The amorphous shadow beings that had initially approached their efforts with cautious curiosity now actively contributed, gathering remnant particles from Thrugo out the void and delivering them to appropriate creation seeds, maintaining energy flow patterns between nodes, even establishing rudimentary atmospheric conditions around newly formed planets. The council meeting starts in 20 minutes. Kale reminded him gently. Vados said you should review the latest expansion data before the representatives arrive. Naruto nodded, reluctantly turning away from the mesmerizing cosmic light show. The Restoration Council had been his idea, gathering representatives from the first civilizations to re-emerge from the creation seeds to participate in guiding the universe's rebirth. Though initially skeptical, both Vados and Hitomi had come to recognize the value of incorporating multiple perspectives in their decision-making process. Are the quantum communication arrays functioning properly? He asked as they walked toward the central complex that had grown from their simple command center into a proper headquarters facility. Caulifla completed the final calibrations this morning. Kale confirmed. All 5 civilization nodes can connect simultaneously now. Naruto smiled at this news. Caulifla had surprised everyone by revealing unexpected talent for quantum mechanics, her intuitive understanding of energy systems translating effectively to technological applications once Hitomi provided basic theoretical frameworks from the archives. E-communication system allowing real-time connection between distant worlds had been primarily her creation, though she dismissed praise with characteristic gruffness. As they entered the central complex, they found Hitomi already preparing the council chamber, her crystalline form projecting data displays around the circular table while her archive floated nearby, pages turning automatically as information was extracted and formatted for presentation. Naruto-san, she acknowledged, her simple eyes reconfiguring in what they had come to recognize as her version of a greeting smile. The ancient metrics from the past 72 hours show particularly interesting developments in the Namekian sector. Where once Hitomi had communicated exclusively in precise technical terminology, she had gradually adopted more conversational speech patterns through her interaction with the team. The rigid formality remained in her approach, but small adaptations, honorifics, colloquialisms, even occasional attempts at humor, revealed her growing comfort with emotional beings. What kind of developments? Naruto asked, scanning the displayed data. Life signatures, Hitomi replied, highlighting a specific section of the projection. Primitive but distinct biological patterns emerging spontaneously within the newly formed oceans. The memory imprints appear to be reconstructing original Namekian evolutionary sequences. The implications were profound, and hope-inspiring. If simple life forms were spontaneously reconstructing from memory imprints, more complex organisms might follow the same pattern. Perhaps even sentient beings could eventually reconstruct themselves through this process, though that remained theoretical. Have you shared this with Vados yet? Naruto inquired, studying the biological signatures with intense interest. I was about to, but she's currently, Hitomi began, only to be interrupted by the angel's timely arrival. Currently observing a much more significant development, Vados completed, entering the chamber with unusual urgency in her typically measured movements. A dimensional anomaly has formed near the Sadala creation seed. It appears to be a bridge between universes, or more accurately, between dimensional planes. All activity in the room halted as the implications of this announcement registered. Dimensional bridges weren't part of the IR restoration plan. They represented an unexpected variable with unknown consequences. Natural or artificial? Naruto asked immediately, mentally preparing for potential threats. Neither, precisely, Vados replied, using her staff to project a visual of the phenomenon. It appears to be a side effect of the creation process itself. As Universe 6 reestablishes its cosmic boundaries, it natural Y seeks equilibrium with adjacent dimensional spaces. The projection showed what looked like a vertical tear in space, not unlike the rift that had originally pulled Naruto from his world, though more stable in its formation. Energy patterns flowed around its edges in hypnotic spirals, containing the dimensional breach within a self-regulating framework. Is it dangerous? Kale asked, studying the image with concern. Not inherently, Vados assured them, but it does represent a significant variable in our restoration process. If multiple such bridges form, they could potentially introduce external elements into Universe 6 during its vulnerable reformation period, or provide escape routes for things that should remain contained, Hitomi added, her archive flipping to a new section. Quote, historical records document 17 previous incidents of dimensional breach during standard universal cycles. Consequences ranged from minor energy fluctuations to catastrophic reality corruption requiring divine intervention. We should investigate immediately, Naruto decided, already formulating a plan. How long until the council meeting? 15 minutes, 17 seconds, Hitomi reported precisely. Not enough time for physical travel to Sadala, Naruto mused. But perhaps we don't need to be there physically. Vados, can your projection capabilities give us a clearer view of what's happening? The angel nodded, adjusting her staff's position. The image expanded dramatically, resolution increasing until they could see the dimensional tear in remarkable detail. Energy pattern. NS around its perimeter had stabilized into regular pulsations, suggesting the anomaly had reached equilibrium rather than continuing to expand. Most intriguing was the view through the tear itself, not empty space or cosmic darkness, but what appeared to be an actual environment. Snow-covered terrain was visible, with strange crystalline formations rising like towers in the background. Occasional movement suggested the presence of living beings, though the perspective wasn't clear enough to identify specifics. That's not any region of Universe 6 I recognize, Hitomi observed, her archive raw. Piddly flipping pages as she searched references. The crystalline architecture suggests possible correspondence with Universe 9 design principles, though the atmospheric composition appears incongruent with that hypothesis. As they studied the projection, the tear's energy signature suddenly fluctuated. The pulsations accelerated, and the opening itself widened momentarily before stabilizing at approximately twice its original diameter. Something's coming through, Naruto warned, instinctively reaching for a kunai despite the vast distance between their location and the anomaly. The Prohei Seishin showed a figure emerging from the dimensional tear, humanoid but distinctly alien, with pale blue-white skin and a sleek, armored exoskeleton that seemed partially biological rather than manufactured. The being moved with fluid grace despite the obvious physical strength suggested by its muscular build, scanning its surroundings with calculating precision. A frost demon, Vados identified immediately. Though not one I recognize from Universe 6's original population. Frost demon, Naruto questioned, unfamiliar with the species despite their extensive study of Universe 6 civilizations through Hitomi's archives. Colloquial term for the species properly known as glacians, Hitomi explained, displaying historical images for reference. Extremely powerful beings capable of surviving in vacuum, projecting energy at devastating levels, and transforming their physical forms to augment combat capabilities. Universe 6's most notable member was Frost, who participated in the Tournament of Power against Universe 7. That's definitely not the Frost I remember, Caulifla announced, entering the chamber with perfect dramatic timing. Her hair was damp from recent training, a towel slung casually around her neck. Different build, different markings. Also, our Frost was male. That one's clearly female. She was right, Naruto noted upon closer examination. The being emerging from the tear had distinctly feminine physical characteristics despite the alien physiology, with more slender proportions than the reference images Hitomi displayed. An alternate universe variant, perhaps, Vados suggested. The dimensional tear may connect to a parallel timeline rather than another numbered universe. As they watched, the Frost Demon surveyed her surroundings with methodical attention, occasionally consulting what appeared to be a wrist-mounted device. Her movements suggested purpose rather than confusion. This was not accidental dimensional travel but deliberate exploration. Can she detect that she's being observed? Naruto asked Vados. Unlikely at this distance, the angel replied. Though frost demons possess exceptional sensory capabilities. As if directly contradicting this assessment, the being suddenly looked up, her crimson eyes seeming to stare directly into Vados's projection focus. A slight smile curved her lips before she raised a hand in what appeared to be a deliberate greeting gesture. She absolutely knows we're watching, Caulifla observed dryly. Fascinating, Hitomi murmured. Direct awareness of trans-dimensional observation suggests perpetual capabilities beyond documented Glacian parameters. The frost demon's lips moved, clearly speaking though no sound transmitted through Vados's projection. She repeated the statement several times with increasing emphasis before seeming to realize the communication limitation. Frowning slightly, she activated her wrist device, adjusting controls with precise movements. Suddenly, a Mechanica L voice emerged from their communication array. "Hear me now. This is Ambassador Frost of the Galactic Alliance. I am receiving dimensional scanning but no audio transmission. Please acknowledge if receiving this message." Everyone exchanged startled glances. The being had somehow identified their observation method and managed to interface with their communication system despite the vast distances involved. "Should we respond?" Kale asked uncertainly. "If she's already aware of our presence, maintaining silence serves no strategic purpose," Naruto reasoned. "And, Ambassador, suggests diplomatic rather than hostile intent." Vados nodded agreement, adjusting her staff to enable two-way communication. "This is Vados, Angel Attendant of Universe 6. Your dimensional transition has been detected. Please identify your universe of origin and purpose for crossing the boundary." Relief visibly crossed the Frost Demon's features as she received the response. "Angel Vados, this confirms my readings. I've successfully reached Universe 6 remnant space. My origin point is complicated, a dimensional pocket existing between Universes 6 and 7 following the Tournament of Power Erasure event." His revelation caused immediate tension in the room. Someone who had survived the universal erasure independently of their efforts represented both a valuable information source and a potential complication to their restoration project. "How many survivors exist in this dimensional pocket?" Vados inquired. "Just myself and approximately 300 refugees I managed to gather before erasure completed." The self-identified Frost replied. "We've been trapped in a deteriorating reality bubble for what subjectively feels like several months. Recently, we detected energy signatures suggesting Universe 6 reconstruction and managed to identify this tear as a potential escape route." "Are the other refugees preparing to cross through as well?" Naruto asked, concerned about a potential mass exodus through an unstable dimensional bridge. Frost shook her head. "Not possible at present. The tear only stabilized sufficiently for single-entity transit approximately 3 hours ago. I volunteer. Red as scout to determine viability for larger-scale evacuation." The council meeting now entirely forgotten, Naruto made a quick decision. "We should continue this conversation in person. Ambassador Frost, if you're willing to travel to our central restoration facility, we can discuss your situation more effectively and determine how to help your refugees." For the first time, hesitation showed in the Frost Demon's demeanor. "You're not physically present at Sadala's location. My instruments indicated the observation originated locally. We're monitoring from our headquarters," Caulifla explained impatiently. "Look, do you want help or not? Because we've got a universe to rebuild and a council meeting that started 5 minutes ago." Frost seemed to consider this blunt statement before nodding decisively. "Coordinates for your facility. I can travel quite rapidly through space." Vados provided the necessary navigational information, and the Frost Demon nodded in acknowledgement. "Estimated arrival in approximately 6 hours, assuming consistent void physics along the route," she calculated. "I look forward to meeting the restoration team in person. Particularly the Energy Sue, RCE designated Golden Healer, by our instruments. Quite the interesting signature you project, whoever you are." With that parting comment, she terminated the communication link and launched into space with impressive speed, leaving the dimensional tear behind as she set course for their island sanctuary. "Well," Caulifla remarked into the stunned silence that followed, "that's definitely not the Frost I remember. Ours was nowhere near that direct. Female. An alternate timeline variant seems the most logical explanation," Hitomi suggested, her archives displaying comparative analysis of known Frost demons. The dimensional pocket she described likely preserved a different configuration of Universe 6 than the one from your original timeline. "The council representatives have been waiting for 12 minutes now," Vados reminded them with gentle persistence. "Perhaps Ambassador Frost's arrival can be prepared for while you conduct your scheduled meeting." Naruto nodded, mentalizing the dimensional development for later consideration. "You're right, Kale. Could you prepare appropriate accommodations for our unexpected guest? And perhaps ask Hitomi to compile relevant information about Frost demons for reference." Kale nodded, clearly pleased to be entrusted with important responsibilities. I'll make sure everything is ready for her arrival. As she departed with Hitomi, Naruto and Caulifla quickly reviewed the expansion data they would present to the council before entering the communication chamber. 5 holographic projections awaited them, each representing one of the first civilizations to re-emerge during the restoration process. From Sadala, a gruff Saiyan elder named Paragus served as representative, one of the first individuals to spontaneously reform from memory imprints when the creation seed reached sufficient size. From Namek, a wise being called Guru whose gentle demeanor belied considerable power. The other representatives included a Metalian scientist, a Heron diplomat, and a collective consciousness from a species of crystalline entities that communicated in unified thought patterns. Apologies for our tardiness, Naruto began, bowing respectfully to the assembled projections. An unexpected dimensional development required immediate attention. More dimensional anomalies, the Metalian scientist inquired, multiple mechanical appendages adjusting what appeared to be sensory equipment. Our instruments detected 17 micro-tears within our local space during the past cycle. None large enough for physical transit, but sufficient for energy pattern disruption. This was concerning news. If small tears were forming throughout the restoring universe, the phenomenon they had observed at Sadala might be merely the most prominent example of a widespread issue. That aligns with our observations, Naruto acknowledged. We've just documented the first major tear near Sadala, stable enough to permit physical crossing. Most concerning, Guru commented, his massive form shifting slightly in his throne-like seat. The barriers between dimensions exist for important reasons. Weakening them during our vulnerable reformation period could invite unfortunate influences. Or fortunate ones, the Heron diplomat countered. Our historical records speak of periods when dimensional commerce brought significant advancements to multiple realities. Perhaps these tiers represent opportunity rather than threat. The discussion continued in this vein for some time, with representatives debating the implications of dimensional breaches while Naruto and Caulifla presented the latest expansion data. Despite the concerning nature of the dimensional tiers, the overall restoration progress remained encouraging. Neural Y 15% of Universe 6's original volume now showed active reformation, with complex systems beginning to establish themselves around the primary creation seeds. As the meeting concluded, T.H.E. Metalian representative made an unexpected request. The Golden Healer's energy signature has been detected throughout our restoration zone. Our people wish to express gratitude through appropriate ceremonial acknowledgement. Would a visitation be possible in the near future? Naruto blinked in surprise. This was the first he had heard of being called the Golden Healer, outside Vados's initial use of the term. I would be honored to visit your world once stability permits safe travel. After exchanging formal pleasantries, the communication links closed, leaving Naruto and Caulifla alone in the chamber. Golden Healer, huh? Caulifla remarked with a mixture of amusement and something less definable. Your reputation is spreading faster than the universe itself. I didn't ask for titles, Naruto replied, slightly uncomfortable with the reverence the Metalian representative had displayed. I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's exactly why they're giving you titles, Caulifla pointed out, surprising him with her insight. Because you're not asking for them. These people lost everything. Their worlds, their civilizations, their very existence. Then suddenly, there be because some random ninja from another dimension decided they deserved to exist again. Of course they're going to build legends around you. Her assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Throughout his life, Naruto had noticed how his actions often generated responses disproportionate to his intentions, from the villagers' hatred during his childhood to their adulation after he saved Konoha from pain. People needed narratives to make sense of significant events, and the Golden Healer was apparently becoming part of Universe 6's restoration narrative whether he intended it or not. Just don't let it go to your head, Caulifla added with a smirk, punching his shoulder lightly as she moved past him toward the door. I'd hate to have to knock you down a few pegs. As if you could, Naruto retorted automatically. The familiar competitive banter a welcome relief from weightier considerations. Caulifla paused at the doorway, glancing back with a challenging grin that contained something warmer beneath the surface. Anytime, anywhere, Golden Boy, just name the place. As she departed, Naruto found himself smiling despite the complex developments of the day. Caulifla's brash confide, NCE and straightforward approach provided grounding counterbalance to the increasingly cosmic scope of their restoration project. She reminded him, in ways both subtle and obvious, that even universe builders remained fundamentally human, or Saiyan, as the case might be. 6 hours later, their island sanctuary prepared for its first official diplomatic visitor. A proper reception area had been created near the landing zone, simple but elegant in design, with a central pavilion surrounded by gardens that showcased plant life from multiple restored worlds. Naruto had added traditional Konoha elements to the landscape architecture, creating an aesthetic that blended familiar comfort with cosmic significance. Kale had overseen the preparations with surprising confidence, directing the placement of refreshments appropriate for frost demon physiology according to Hitomi's archives and ensuring comfortable seating arrangements that accommodated the visitor's unique anatomical requirements. Here once she would have deferred such responsibilities to Caulifla or sought constant reassurance, she now handled the tasks with quiet competence. "You've done an excellent job," Naruto told her as they made a final inspection of the reception area. "The space feels welcoming without being overwhelming." Kale's cheeks colored slightly at the praise, though she no longer ducked her head to hide her reaction as she once would have. Hitomi's information helped. Frost demons appreciate aesthetic precision and functional elegance over ornate displays. "Still, the implementation is all yours," Naruto insisted. "You have a good eye for these things." Before she could respond, Caulifla joined them, having changed from her training clothes into what passed for formal attire in her wardrobe, still practical fighting gear, but cleaner and with subtle decorative elements that hinted at Saiyan cultural traditions. "Our guest is approaching," she announced. "Vados detected her energy signature, re-entering our local space about 5 minutes ago." Naruto nodded, smoothing the formal howry he had created for diplomatic occasions. Based on traditional Hokage ceremonial wear but incorporating elements from Universe 6 aesthetics. It struck a balance between his origin and his current role. "Where's Hitomi?" he asked, noting the chronomancer's absence. Consulting the archives for final reference materials, Kale replied. "She'll join us once the initial greetings are complete." They moved to the landing zone, a circular platform of polished stone with intricate patterns inlaid in materials from various restored worlds. Vados awaited them there, her posture more formally composed than usual, staff held precisely vertical beside her. "As angel attendant to Universe 6, protocol dicta. Tes that I provide formal acknowledgement of the first diplomatic visitor to our restoration project," she explained, her tone suggesting this represented more than mere formality. "It establishes IC recognition of Universe 6 reformation as legitimate rather than anomalous." Before Naruto could inquire further about these implications, a point of light appeared in the distance, rapidly approaching their island. Within moments, the light resolved into a figure moving at tremendous speed, the blue-white form of Ambassador Frost decelerating as she approached the landing zone. Her arrival as impressive in its precision. No dramatic impact or unnecessary display of power, simply a perfectly controlled deceleration that brought her to a gentle landing at the exact center of the platform. Up close, her appearance was even more striking than the projection had revealed, tall and regal, with natural armor plates accentuating a form that combined obvious strength with streamlined elegance. "Ambassador Frost," Vados greeted formally, inclining her head precisely the diplomatic amount, neither subservient nor condescending. "Universe 6 acknowledges your arrival as its first interdimencio. Null visitor during the restoration period." The Frost Demon returned the gesture with equal precision. "Angel Vados, your continued existence brings hope to those who believed Universe 6 irrevocably lost. I come seeking understanding and potential salvation for my fellow survivors." The formal exchange completed, Vados stepped aside slightly. "Allow me to introduce the architect of Universe 6 restoration, Naruto Uzumaki. Known to emerging worlds as the Golden Healer." Frost's crimson eyes shifted to Naruto, studying him with analytical intensity that somehow avoided feeling invasive. "So, you're the source of the golden energy signature. Fascinating. Your power reads as entirely foreign to cosmic standards, yet harmonizes perfectly with Universe 6's resonance frequency." "I'm from a different reality entirely," Naruto explained, extending his hand in greeting. pulled here during the restoration process through what we believe was a dimensional anomaly similar to the one you utilized. Frost accepted the handshake, her grip firm but carefully modulated, clearly aware of her species' superior physical strength and taking care not to apply excessive pressure. Dimensional convergence during cosmic reformation. Unprecedented but theoretically sound. The multiverse apparently had plans for Universe 6 beyond Zeno's erasure decree. Her gaze shifted to Caulifla and Kale. Saya, NS from the original Universe 6 configuration. Your survival further supports the theory that erasure was incompletely implemented. Most encouraging for my refugees' prospects. We survived in a pocket dimension, Caulifla confirmed. Though it was collapsing when Naruto found us. How has your group maintained stability for months? A combination of technologies and biological adaptations, Fr. Ost explained as they guided her toward the reception pavilion. My species evolved to survive extreme conditions, including vacuum and radiation that would kill most life forms. When I sensed the erasure event beginning, I gathered as many nearby individuals as possible within a specialized containment field originally designed for interstellar colonization. It wasn't intended for long-term habitation, but we've managed modifications to extend its functionality. As they settled in the pavilion, Frost accepted the offered refreshment, a crystalline beverage Hitomi had indicated was appropriate for her species' preferences. Taking a careful sip, she nodded appreciatively before continuing her explanation. The pocket dimension exists in a quantum state of partial definition, neither fully within nor entirely outside normal spacetime. This has allowed us to observe the void where Universe 6 once existed while remaining functionally separate from it. When energy signatures suggesting reconstruction appeared, we naturally investigated. 300 survivors, you mentioned. Naruto confirmed, mentally calculating what accommodations would be required if they all evacuated to the island sanctuary. 327 precisely, Frost corrected, representing 22 species from 17 planets that happened to be in my vicinity when erasure began. Primarily Civi, Liens with a small contingent of scientific and security personnel who were attending a technological exchange conference on an orbital platform. Your dimensional pocket is deteriorating, Vados observed. Not a question but a statement of fact. Otherwise you would not risk exploration through an unstable breach. Frost nodded, setting aside her drink. Structural integrity is failing at an accelerating rate. Our projections indicate complete collapse within approximately 28 days. Hence the urgency of my mission. Can your entire group travel through the dimensional tear you utilized? Kale asked, her concern for the refugees evident. Unlikely, Frost admitted. The tear's stability fluctuates unpredictably. My passage may have further destabilized it, potentially rendering it unsuitable for additional transits. We would need either multiple tiers of similar configuration or a method of expanding and stabilizing the existing breach. The gravity of the situation settled over the group. 300 lives hung in the balance, their salvation dependent on solving a dimensional transport problem none of them had expertise in. Hitomi might have relevant information in the archives, Naruto suggested. And I could experiment with chakra techniques for dimensional stabilization. I've had some experience with space-time manipulation, though nothing quite at this scale. I appreciate your willingness to assist, Frost said, genuine gratitude evident in her tone. Though I must ask, your restoration project appears to be successfully rebuilding Universe 6 itself. Why not simply wait for the natural reconstruction to reach our dimensional pocket? Wouldn't we be automatically reintegrated as the universe reforms? Vados shook her head slightly. The Restora, Tion follows memory imprints contained within remnant particles. Your pocket dimension exists outside that pattern, essentially in a parallel state rather than a potential future state. Natural reconstruction will likely bypass your location entirely. Which means rescue must be active rather than passive, Frost concluded, processing this information with remarkable composure given its life or death implications. What resources can you spare for this endeavor? Before anyone could respond, a new dimensional anomaly manifested without warning, a vertical tear in reality appearing directly within their reception pavilion. Unlike the stable breach at Sadala, this tear pulsed with erratic energy, its edges fluctuating wildly as if struggling to maintain coherence. Everyone reacted instant L.Y. Vados raising her staff in defensive position, Caulifla and Kale dropping into combat stances, Frost's body tensing for potential engagement. Naruto, however, remained motionless, his eyes wide with shock as he stared into the dimensional opening. Through the fluctuating tear, a landscape appeared, one instantly recognizable to him despite the instability of the image. Stone faces carved into a mountain backdrop. Buildings with distinctive architectural elements, streets he had walked thousands of times. Konoha, he whispered, his voice barely audible. The tear widened momentarily, providing a clearer view of the hidden leaf village, his home, seemingly going about normal daily activities. People moved through the streets, unaware of being observed through a crack in reality itself. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, Naruto glimpsed familiar figures, Shikamaru walking with what appeared to be official scrolls under his arm, Sakura directing medical personnel outside the hospital, AC. Academy students running through training exercises under Iruka's watchful eye. Naruto. Kale's concerned voice barely registered as he unconsciously stepped toward the tear, hand reaching out as if to touch the images of home. Before his fingers could make contact, the dimensional breach collapsed in on itself, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared and leaving only empty air where moments before he had glimpsed his village. Silence hung heavy in the pavilion, everyone watching Naruto with varying degrees of concern as he stood frozen, hand still outstretched toward where the portal had been. "That was your world," Caulifla said softly, the gentleness in her voice unusual enough to draw Naruto back to present awareness. He lowered his arm slowly, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face: longing, relief, confusion, determination. "Yes, Konohagakure, the hidden leaf village. My home. The dimensional tears are increasing in frequency and spontaneity," Vados observed, though her typically clinical tone held a hint of compassion. This supports the theory that Universe 6's reformation is creating ripple effects throughout adjacent realities. "Could we," Naruto began, then paused to gather his thoughts. "Could we reproduce that specific tear? Create a stable connection to Konoha?" The question hung in the air, its implications extending far beyond mere technical considerations. If such a connection could be established, it would mean not just communication with his home but potentially a route back, a choice Naruto wasn't sure he was ready to make given his commitments to the restoration project. "Theoretically possible," Vados replied carefully, "though doing so would require precise harmonic alignment with your home dimension's resonance frequency, information we currently lack. Unless," Frost interjected thoughtfully, "the brief connection created an energy signature we could analyze and potentially replicate. My equipment is designed for dimension AL frequency mapping. If I had received advance notice, I could have taken readings." "The tear's energy signature should have left residual traces," Hitomi announced, entering the pavilion with her archive floating beside her. "I detected the anomaly from the research chamber and initiated automatic recording protocols. Preliminary analysis suggests a recurring harmonic pattern that could potentially be reproduced under controlled conditions." Hope flared briefly in Naruto's chest before responsibility tempered it. "The refugee situation takes priority," he stated firmly. "Those people have less than a month before their pocket dimension collapses. Establishing communication with Konoha is secondary to saving lives." His decisive prioritization drew approving looks from everyone present. Though Caulifla and Kale exchanged a brief glance that suggested they recognized the personal cost of his decision. "Perhaps the solutions are related," Frost suggested. "If we can understand how to stabilize and control dimensional breaches sufficiently to rescue my people, the same principles might apply to establishing communication with your home world." "A logical approach," Hitomi agreed, her archive pages flipping rapidly as she consulted relevant sections. "Historical precedents suggest dimensional harmonization techniques often have multiple viable applications once basic principles are mastered." With renewed purpose, the group moved their discussion toward practical planning. Frost shared detailed specifications of her dimensional pocket structure and deterioration patterns, while Hitomi cross-referenced this information with historical records of similar phenomena. Vados contributed crucial insights about cosmic boundary principles, and Naruto began experimenting with chakra configurations that might help stabilize dimensional tiers. As the technical discussion proceeded, Caulifla subtly moved closer to Naruto, speaking quietly enough that only he could hear. "You okay? Seeing your home like that, then having it disappear again, that's got to be rough." The simple question, asked without her usual bravado, touched Naruto deeply. "I'm processing," he admitted. "Part of me wanted to leap through that portal immediately. But another part," he hesitated, struggling to articulate complex emotions. "Another part has commitments here," Caulifla finished for him, her perceptiveness surprising him once again. "People depending on you. A universe half rebuilt." Naruto nodded, grateful for her understanding. "Plus, there's no guarantee I could return if I left. I might end up abandoning this universe permanently just when it needs the most help." "We'd manage," Caulifla stated with characteristic confidence, though something in her eyes belied the casualness of her words. "But I'm glad you're staying. For the universe's sake, obviously." The qualifier didn't quite mask the personal sentiment beneath it, a development in their relationship that either explicitly acknowledged but both increasingly recognized. Their initial antagonism had evolved through respect and cooperation into something more complex, a connection that transcended mere alliance or friendship. Before Naruto could respond, Kale approached with tentative excitement. "Hitomi may have found something useful in the archives. A historical technique for dimensional bridge stabilization used by ancient Universe 10 civilizations." Grateful for both the interruption and the potential breakthrough, Naruto rejoined the main discussion. The glimpse of Konoha had reawakened his connection to home, but paradoxically strengthened his determination to complete his mission here. Knowing his village continued to exist gave him reassurance that his eventual return wouldn't be to tragedy or crisis. His friends and loved ones carried on in his absence, allowing him to focus on the immediate needs of Universe 6's restoration and Frost's endangered refugees. Over the following days, the island sanctuary transformed into a hub of interdimensional research and experimentation. Frost integrated seamlessly into their team, her analytical mind and technical expertise complementing their existing skill sets. Where Hitomi provided historical knowledge and Vados offered cosmic principles, Frost contributed practical experience with dimensional mechanics gained through maintaining her refugee pocket. Naruto, meanwhile, found himself at the center of multiple experimental approaches. His unique chakra proved exceptionally effective at stabilizing dimensional tiers during controlled tests, while his shadow clone technique allowed simultaneous exploration of different methodologies without risking permanent damage to reality's fabric. "The key appears to be harmonization rather than force," he explained during an evening briefing session. "When I try to directly manipulate the tear's structure, it resists and eventually collapses. But when I synchronize my chakra with its natural frequency, it accepts the energy and actually strengthens." Consistent with historical accounts, Hitomi confirmed, her archive displaying relevant precedents. The boundaries between dimensions aren't truly solid barriers but frequency differentials. Adjusting one's energy to match the differential allows passage or manipulation without disruption. "My refugees have inadvertently been employing a primitive version of this principle," Frost added. "Their combined life energies have naturally synchronized with our pocket dimension's frequency, helping maintain its integrity despite structural deterioration. That's likely why we've survived longer than theoretical models predicted. Then the solution to your rescue operation may lie in extending that synchronization effect," Vados suggested. "Creating a controlled tear that matches your pocket dimension's frequency precisely, then harmonizing the refugees' energy signatures to maintain stability during transit." The theoretical framework was sound, but practical implementation required refinement. Multiple small-scale tests were conducted using controlled dimensional tiers created under laboratory conditions. Naruto's shadow clones served as test subjects, attempting passage through stabilized breaches while monitoring energy harmonization patterns. During one such experiment, an unexpected development occurred. A clone successfully passed through a stabilized tear into what should have been a controlled pocket dimension created specifically for testing. Instead, it emerged into a completely different environment before the tear collapsed behind it. The clone's memories, returning to Naruto upon its eventual dispersion, revealed a startling discovery. It appeared in Konoha, Naruto reported to the team, still processing the implications. Not in the village center, but at the outskirts near the forest. The clone existed there for approximately 10 minutes before dispelling itself to return the information. "Did anyone see it?" Caulifla asked, immediately recognizing the potential complications. "No, it maintained concealment," Naruto assured her. But it confirmed that what we saw through He spontaneous tear was indeed the current Konoha. The clone observed the calendar date in a shop window. Time seems to be flowing similarly between our dimensions. This revelation added new complexity to their research. The dimensional tear they had stabilized for testing had somehow automatically connected to Konoha rather than the artificial pocket they had intended. Something about Naruto's Hakra appeared to be creating preferential pathways to his home dimension when given sufficient freedom to influence tear direction. This could be advantageous for both our objectives, Frost noted thoughtfully. If your chakra naturally seeks connection to your home dimension, perhaps it could be used as a guiding principle for all dimensional navigation. We could potentially create a standard Z method for controlled breaches to specific target dimensions. The research continued with renewed vigor, now pursuing dual objectives, rescuing Frost's refugees and establishing stable communication with Konoha. Rather than competing priorities, these goals proved complementary, each breakthrough in one area contributing to progress in the other. Meanwhile, the Universe Restoration Project continued its steady expansion. The Creation Seed Network now encompassed nearly 20% of Universe 6's original volume, with increasingly complex systems establishing themselves throughout restored space. Regular council meetings kept Naruto informed of developments across multiple worlds, each reporting accelerating restoration and the emergence of increasingly complex life forms. Most encouraging were reports from Sadala, where the first humanoid life signatures had begun to appear, spontaneous reconstitution of Saiyan inhabitants from memory imprints embedded in the planet's very structure. Though still limited to relatively simple organisms, the progression suggested that eventually, sentient beings might indeed reform through the same process. Throughout these developments, the team dynamics continued to evolve. Frost's integration brought new perspectives and shifted existing relationships in subtle ways. Her analytical mind and diplomatic training made her a natural mediator during technical disagreements. While her first-hand experience with universe erasure gave her unique insight into the existential aspects of their work. Perhaps most interesting was her interaction with Caulifla, which began with mutual wariness but quickly developed into something approaching friendship built on shared directness. Where the original male Frost that Caulifla had known had been deceptive and manipulative, this female variant valued straightforward communication and transparent motives, traits that resonated with Caulifla's own approach. "You're nothing like our universe's version of you," Caulifla remarked during a training session where Frost had demonstrated combat techniques unique to her species. He was all smiles and hidden agendas. "You actually say what you mean." "Fascinating," Frost replied, cooling her body temperature after the exertion. "In my timeline, diplomatic directness became the Glacian standard after historical analysis proved deception ultimately counterproductive to species advancement. Perhaps your universe's variant never experienced the cultural shift that redirected our evolutionary path." Such discussions of parallel development became common as they worked together, each team member gaining deeper understanding of how small variances in history could produce dramatically different outcomes across dimensions and timelines. Kale, meanwhile, continued her remarkable personal growth. Working closely with Hitomi on archive research, she developed scholarly confidence to complement her increasing physical mastery. The shy, Urtain girl who had first arrived in the void now offered insightful analysis during planning sessions and demonstrated initiative in pursuing research directions others might have overlooked. Most significant was her ongoing work with Naruto on harmonizing her dual energy nature. Through consistent practice with chakra-controlled techniques adapted for her unique physiology, she made substantial progress toward integrating her berserker form with her base consciousness. "The key is embracing rather than suppressing," Naruto explained during one particularly productive session. "Your power isn't separate from you, it's a natural expression of your true potential, just manifesting in a way your conscious mind initially found overwhelming." Kale nodded thoughtfully, maintaining the meditation pose he had taught her. "It's like two rivers that can either crash against each other or flow together to become stronger." "Exactly," Naruto confirmed, pleased with her metaphor. "When you fought the energies against each other, the conflict created the berserk state. By accepting both as equally valid expressions of your true self, you can achieve harmony without loss of control." To demonstrate her progress, Kale carefully activated her transformation, not the full berserker form, but a controlled intermediate state where her muscle mass increased moderately and her hair shifted to or. The characteristic green while her eyes remained clear and aware. I can hold this state now, she said, her voice deeper but still recognizably her own. And maintain conscious control of my actions and energy output. That's incredible progress, Naruto praised sincerely. Most people would take years to achieve that level of integration. Kale allowed the transformation to subside, returning to her base form with controlled precision rather than the collapse of exhaustion that had characterized her early attempts. I have an excellent teacher, she said softly, her eyes meeting his with growing confidence. Someone who understands what it's like to contain power that others fear. The moment between them stretched, something unspoken yet increasingly clear passing between them. Here once Kale had looked to Naruto primarily for technical guidance, their connection had evolved to include deeper dimensions, mutual understanding, shared experiences, and growing personal affinity that transcended mere mentorship. Such moments occurred with increasing frequency as their shared mission created natural opportunities for deeper bonds to form. Whether working side by side on restoration projects, training together to refine techniques, or simply sharing quiet conversations during rare downtime, the team grew closer through their common purpose and complementary strengths. Even Vados, traditionally maintaining the detached perspective expected of angels, showed subtle signs of evolving beyond her prescribed role. Her observations increasingly included subjective assessments alongside objective analysis, and she occasionally participated in philosophical discussions that ventured into territory angels typically avoided, questions of cosmic justice, the ethics of divine authority, and the proper relationship between mortals and higher beings. The restoration project represents an unprecedented philosophical case study, she remarked during one such conversation. Traditionally, universe creation and destruction remain exclusively within divine purview. Yet here, mortal beings implement restoration processes with efficiency that rivals or potentially exceeds standard divine methodology. Does that concern you? Naruto asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Mortals taking on roles traditionally reserved for gods. Vados considered the question with unusual thoughtfulness before responding. Concern implies emotional investment inappropriate to my function. However, from an analytical standpoint, I find the situation worthy of reconsideration regarding certain cosmic principles. You're questioning whether the strict separation between mortal and divine domains actually makes sense, Hitomi interpreted, her simple eyes spinning through thoughtful configurations. Perhaps questioning is too strong a term, Vados replied carefully. Let us say I am collecting data that may eventually inform potential reassessment of traditional paradigms. Such careful phrasing didn't disguise the significant conceptual shift her statement represented. For an angel to even consider that established cosmic hierarchies might warrant reconsideration was extraordinary, a testament to how profoundly their restoration project challenged fundamental assumptions about the universe's operation. 3 weeks after Ambassador Frost's arrival, a breakthrough finally occurred in their dimensional rescue research. Through careful combination of Naruto's chakra stabilization techniques, Frost's dimensional frequency mapping, Hitomi's historical methodologies, and Vados's cosmic harmonization principles, they developed a viable approach for establishing a stable connection to the refugee pocket dimension. The theoretical framework is sound, Hitomi concluded after reviewing their comprehensive models. Probability of successful implementation exceeds 87.3%, well above minimum safety thresholds for dimensional transition operations. In less technical terms, it should work. Frost translated, barely containing her excitement despite her usual composure. We can open a stable passage large enough for all refugees to transit safely. He approach requires creating a primary dimensional anchor point here, Naruto explained, indicating their island sanctuary on the planning display. Then establishing a corresponding harmonic resonant, or within the pocket dimension to create matched frequency endpoints. I'll transport the resonator component personally, Frost volunteered immediately. Having made the journey once already, my energy signature has established a natural pathway that should facilitate return transit. The window for stable connection will be approximately 17 hours once both anchor points are active, Hitomi added. Sufficient time for methodical evacuation of all refugees, but requiring careful coordination to ensure complete extraction before destabilization occurs. With the plan finalized, preparations began immediately. Naruto led the construction of the anchor facility, a circular structure incorporating elements from Uzumaki sealing techniques, Frost Demon dimensional technology, and cosmic principles provided by Vados. The resulting creation resembled a massive seal array built into the very structure of their island, with concentric rings of specialized materials surrounding a center platform where the dimensional breach would be controlled. While physical construction proceeded, Kale worked with Hitomi to prepare temporary accommodations for the incoming refugees. Using data provided by Frost regarding species requirements and social structures, they created a transitional settlement adjacent to their headquarters, comfortable dwellings arranged according to cultural preferences, with appropriate environmental adjustments for diverse physiological needs. Caulifla, surprisingly, took charge of security and integration planning. 300 people suddenly appearing in our restoration hub creates potential complications, she explained during a planning session. They'll be disoriented, possibly traumatized, and definitely anxious about their future. We need clear protocols for initial stabilization, medical assessment, and resource allocation. Her practical approach to these challenges revealed leadership capabilities that had previously remained largely untapped during their technical-focused restoration work. Where Naruto provided inspiration and Hitomi supplied information, Caulifla demonstrated natural talent for operational implementation, translating complex plans into actionable steps with clear accountability. 5 days later, all preparations were complete. Frost stood at the center of the anchor facility, the resonator component securely attached to her armor. Around her, the team gathered for final confirmation before activation. Communication will be impossible once you enter the dimensional tear until the resonator establishes connection, Vados reminded her. Estimated time to complete harmonic linkage is approximately 3 hours after placement. Understood, Frost acknowledged. I've memorized all contingency protocols and prepared my people for immediate evacuation once the passage stabilizes. Remember, the resonator needs to be positioned at the exact center of the pocket dimension's gravitational field, Hitomi emphasized. Deviation of more than 0.7 meters will reduce stability and potentially shorten the connection window. Frost nodded, her expression reflecting both determination and the weight of responsibility for her people's survival. I won't fail them. Before the final activation sequence, she turned to Naruto with unexpected formality. Golden Healer, she said, using his increasingly common title rather than his name. My people will owe their lives to your willingness to help strangers from a universe not even your own. Such debt cannot be adequately expressed, but know that the surviving Glacians will honor it for generations to come. No debt necessary, Naruto replied sincerely. Helping people who need it isn't something that requires repayment. It's simply the right thing to do. Frost studied him with those penetrating crimson eyes, seeming to look beyond his words to the core principles that motivated them. A philosophy worthy of universal restoration, she finally said. Let us proceed. Taking position at the precise center of the anchor array, Frost activated her personal dimensional shielding while Naruto and the others initiated the breach sequence. Gold N chakra flowed through the concentric seal rings, meeting Vados's cosmic energy at precise junction points while Hitomi monitored harmonic frequencies with instruments derived from her archive's historical designs. The air above Frost began to ripple, reality folding inward before stretching outward in what had become a familiar pattern of dimensional tear formation. Unlike the unpredictable spontaneous breaches, this tear formed with controlled precision, its edges stable, its interior clearly showing the destination. A metallic chamber filled with advanced technology, presumably the central area of the refugee pocket dimension. Frequency stabilized at optimal parameters, Hitomi confirmed. Breach is ready for transit. With a final acknowledging nod to the team, Frost stepped into the dimensional tear and vanished. The passage remaining open behind her as designed. Now began the waiting period, 3 hours of careful monitoring while she positioned the resonator in her pocket dimension to establish the stable connection bridge. As the technical work transitioned to passive monitoring, the team members gradually dispersed to final preparation tasks, leaving Naruto alone with Vados at the control station. The angel stood in her characteristic pose, staff held precisely vertical, expression revealing nothing of her thoughts as she observed the dimensional breach. "Something on your mind?" Naruto asked after several minutes of companionable silence. Vados glanced at him, one elegant eyebrow raised slightly. "What leads you to that conclusion?" "Experience with people, who think too much while saying too little," Naruto replied with a small smile. "Plus, you've been tapping your staff exactly every 3.2 seconds, a pattern Hitomi mentioned you display when processing complex conceptual problems." This observation drew a rare look of surprise from the angel. "Your perceptiveness continues to develop in interesting ways, Golden Healer." "Just Naruto is fine," he reminded her. Still uncomfortable with the increasingly reverent title. "As you wish," she acknowledged. "To answer your question, yes, I am contemplating certain implications of our current activities. Specifically, the relationship between divine decree and mortal intervention in cosmic affairs." "You mean the fact that these refugees technically shouldn't exist anymore according to Zeno's erasure order," Naruto surmised. Vados inclined her head slightly. "Precisely. While Universe 6 itself has been officially restored through the wish made by the Tournament of Power Victors, these specify C individuals represent a category of existence outside standardized cosmic parameters. By rescuing them, we potentially introduce variables the divine hierarchy never accounted for in the restoration plan." "Is that actually a problem?" Naruto asked. "They're people who survived through no fault of their own. Doesn't their continued existence suggest the universe has room for exceptions to even divine rules?" "A philosophically interesting proposition," Vados replied carefully. "Angels traditionally operate within strict interpretive frameworks regarding divine will. Yet increasingly, I find merit in considering more flexible approaches to cosmic administration." Coming from an angel, this represented an extraordinary statement, nearly heretical by traditional standards. That Vados W. Old share such thoughts with him indicated both unusual trust and profound reconsideration of principles she had likely maintained for millions of years. The restoration project itself might be considered an exception to divine rules. Naruto pointed out, not just rebuilding what was erased, but potentially improving upon the original design through the unique methods we're employing. Indeed, Vados agreed. Which raises the question of whether divine decree represents absolute cosmic law or merely one approach to universal administration among many possible methodologies. Before our philosophical discussion could continue further, alarms sounded from the monitoring station. Naruto rushed to check the instruments, finding unusual energy patterns emerging around the dimensional breach. "Something's wrong," he announced, rapidly adjusting controls to compensate. "The breach is experiencing frequency fluctuations outside predicted parameters." Vados moved to his side immediately, her staff projecting diagnostic energy into the tier. "The pocket dimension appears to be destabilizing prematurely. Harmonic resonance is deteriorating at 7.3 times the projected rate." "Could Frost have placed the resonator incorrectly?" Naruto asked, already forming shadow clones to assist with emergency stabilization procedures. "Unlikely given her precision," Vados replied, analyzing data with preternatural speed. "This appears to be external interference, something actively disrupting the dimensional frequency patterns rather than natural deterioration." The rest of the team quickly reassembled as emergency protocols activated throughout the facility. Hitomi arrived first, her archive already open to relevant emergency procedures as her symbol eyes processed data streams directly from the monitoring equipment. "Temporal irregularities detected within the frequency matrix," she reported. "Chronological disruption patterns consistent with deliberate manipulation rather than systemic failure." "Someone's attacking the pocket dimension," Caulifla demanded, arriving with Kale close behind. "Not attacking precisely," Hitomi clarified. "Altering its temporal properties to accelerate collapse. The effect appears similar to certain restricted chronometric manipulation techniques documented in Universe 3's Prohibited Technologies archive." "Can we counter it?" Naruto asked, his shadow clones already channeling chakra into the stabilization array surrounding the breach. "Theoretically," Hitomi confirmed, pages flipping rapidly in her archive. "Though doing so requires specialized chronometric countermeasures not included in our original rescue plan." "Improvise," Naruto directed, trusting her encyclopedic knowledge. "Vados, can you reinforce the breach from this end while we develop countermeasures?" The angel nodded, her staff already emitting precisely calibrated cosmic energy into the tear's perimeter. Temporary stabilization is possible, though full counteraction requires addressing the source of interference directly. As they worked frantically to maintain the dimensional connection, the breach suddenly flared with brilliant light. From within emerged not just Frost as expected, but a dozen refugees of various species, all appearing disoriented and alarmed as they materialized on the platform. "Emergency evacuation in progress," Frost announced breathlessly. Helping a wounded Metalian step clear of the breach. Pocket dimension collapsing prematurely. Chronometric destabilization of unknown origin. We have less than 30 minutes before complete structural failure. 28 minutes, 12 seconds based on current deterioration rates, Hitomi corrected, still monitoring instruments. Insufficient time for sequential evacuatee. On a 300 individuals through standard transition protocols. Then we need non-standard protocols, Naruto decided immediately. Vados, can your staff project a stabilization field into the pocket dimension itself? Not just maintaining the breach but reinforcing their entire reality long enough for evacuation. The angel considered for precisely 2 seconds before nodding. Possible but unauthorized. Such direct intervention exceeds standard parameters for angel participation in mortal affairs. I'll take full responsibility for any cosmic consequences, Naruto stated firmly. His people's lives matter more than procedural regulations. Something shifted in Vados's expression, subtle but significant. Very well, Golden Healer. I shall temporarily exceed authorized parameters in service to life preservation. She adjusted her stance, holding her staff with both hands for the first time since they had known her. The orb at its top began glowing with intense light as she channeled power far beyond what she had previously demonstrated. The dimensional breach expanded dramatically under her influence, its borders stabilizing into a perfect circle large enough for multi-PLE people to pass through simultaneously. Caulifla, Kale, Naruto called out, coordinate evacuation on this side, receive refugees and direct them to prepared shelters according to species requirements. Hitomi, monitor temporal stability and alert us to any further deterioration. I'm going through to help organize departure from their end. Without waiting for acknowledgement, Naruto leapt through the expanded breach, emerging into the refugee pocket dimension. The scene that greeted him was one of controlled chaos, approximately 300 individuals of diverse species gathered in what appeared to be a central hub facility. Medical personnel tended to injured or weakened refugees while security teams maintained order despite the obvious fear permeating the atmosphere. The Golden Healer, Frost announced to her people as Naruto arrived. Our salvation has come personally to ensure safe passage. Naruto had no time to correct the messianic framing as he quickly assessed the situation. The pocket dimension itself was visibly deteriorating, spatial fractures appearing along walls and ceiling, spreading like cracks in thin ice. What should have been an orderly evacuation now required immediate action. Form groups of 10, he directed, creating dozens of shadow clones to assist with organization. Priority to injured, children, and those with limited mobility. My clones will guide each group through the passage. Quote, the refugees responded with remarkable discipline despite their dire circumstances, quickly forming the requested groups with minimal confusion. Naruto noted, with approval that their months of survival in this precarious environment had clearly established effective cooperation protocols. As evacuation began in earnest, Naruto extended his senses throughout the pocket dimension, seeking the source of the temporal interference Hitomi had detected. His Sage mode, enhanced by Kurama's abilities, allowed him to perceive energy patterns invisible to normal senses. What he discovered was deeply concerning. A subtle but unmistakable temporal manipulation field emanating from multiple points around the pocket dimension's perimeter. Someone or something had deliberately placed chronometric destabilization devices precisely where they would accelerate the dimension's collapse most effectively. This was planned, he realized, creating additional Shadow W clones to investigate the devices while the evacuation continued. Someone wanted to force an emergency situation. The refugees moved through the expanded breach in orderly waves, Frost coordinating from within while Caulifla and Kale received them on the sanctuary side. Despite the urgency, the process maintained remarkable efficiency, a testament to both the refugees' discipline and his team's preparation. As the final groups prepared for transit, Naruto's investigative clones returned with disturbing news. The destabilization devices incorporated technology far beyond the pocket dimension's current level, with energy signatures that didn't match any known Universe 6 civilization. More concerning still, one clone had glimpsed a figure observing the evacuation from a distance, a tall humanoid with shifting, clock-like patterns visible across its skin, watching the proceedings with evident interest before vanishing into what appeared to be a localized time distortion. Before Naruto could investigate further, Hitomi's urgent voice came through their communication link, critical destabilization accelerating exponentially. Complete structural collapse imminent, estimated time to failure reduced to 47 seconds. Quote, "Final evacuation now," Naruto shouted, creating a massive surge of shadow clones to physically carry the remaining refugees through the breach. As the last groups rushed toward safety, he personally checked every section of the facility to ensure no one remained behind. Finding the dimension empty of life, he sprinted toward the breach just as reality began unraveling around him. The pocket dimension structure was collapsing completely, not merely destabilizing but actively disintegrating into component particles that themselves vanished into true nothingness. Naruto leapt through the breach with seconds to spare, the dimensional tear sealing itself behind him as Vados released her extended power. Landing in a controlled roll on the anchor platform, he turned to witness the monitoring equipment register the complete disappearance of the pocket dimension from detectable reality. 327 refugees successfully evacuated, Hitomi reported with uncharacteristic emotion coloring her normally precise tone. 100% survival rate achieved despite accelerated collapse parameters. A cheer erupted from the led refugees and support personnel, a cathartic release of tension after their narrow escape from oblivion. Frost moved through the crowd, checking on her people while directing medical teams to those requiring immediate attention. Naruto, however, couldn't fully share in the celebration. The evidence of deliberate interference troubled him deeply. Someone had intentionally endangered hundreds of lives by accelerating the pocket dimension's collapse, an act that served no obvious purpose except perhaps to test their rescue capabilities or response protocols. He shared his discoveries with Vados and Hitomi in a quiet corner away from the celebrating refugees. Both listened with grave attention to his description of the destabilization devices and the mysterious figure his clone had glimpsed. The chronometric manipulation signature matches no known Universe 6 civilization, Hitomi confirmed after consulting her archive. However, certain elements align with theoretical temporal technologies documented in restricted sections concerning entities that exist outside standard universal time constraints. Could this be related to the dimensional tiers we've been observing throughout restored space? Naruto asked, connecting potentially related phenomena. A logical hypothesis, Vados acknowledged. The increasing frequency and apparent deliberate positioning of these anomalies suggested possible intelligent direction rather than random natural occurrences. So someone's manipulating time and dimensions throughout our restoration project, Naruto summarized grimly. Testing our responses, maybe preparing for something bigger, or conducting an evaluation, Hitomi suggested. Determining capabilities and adaptation potential before revealing primary objectives. Whatever the mysterious entity's purpose, the incident had demonstrated both vulnerability and strength in their restoration project. The unexpected crisis had forced improvisation beyond their careful plans, yet resulted in complete success thanks to their complementary abilities and willingness to transcend normal limitations, including Vados's unprecedented direct intervention. As the initial excitement of the rescue subsided, the practical challenges of integrating 300 refugees into their operations became the primary focus. Caulifla's preparation proved invaluable as her organized protocols smoothly directed new arrivals to appropriate temporary accommodations while medical teams addressed immediate health concerns. That evening, after ensuring all refugees were safely settled, E-Corps team gathered in their private meeting room to discuss both the rescue operation and its troubling implications. Frost, now officially part of their leadership council as representative of the refugee population, provided detailed information about her people's experiences and observations during their months in the pocket dimension. We detected increasing temporal anomalies approximately 2 weeks ago, she explained, displaying data from her monitoring equipment. Initially, We attributed them to natural deterioration of our pocket dimension. In retrospect, the pattern clearly indicates external manipulation beginning precisely when your restoration project reached 15% completion. Someone's watching our progress and responding to specific milestones, Caulifla concluded. Her tactical mind quickly identifying strategic implications. This wasn't random, it was timed to coincide with a specific phase of universal reconstruction. The question remains, to what purpose? Kale asked softly. Testing our capabilities makes sense only if this entity plans further interaction, either cooperative or adversarial. Or evaluative, Hitomi repeated her earlier assessment. Many ancient cosmic entities documented in the archives observed developing civilizations through escalating challenge scenarios before determining their worthiness for continued existence. Like some kind of universal test. Naruto frowned at the concept. Creating life-threatening situations just to see how we respond. Higher dimensional beings often perceive mortal lives differently than we do. Vados observed with careful neutrality. What appears cruel from our perspective may represent standard assessment methodology from theirs. The discussion continued late into the night. Theories and contingency plans developing as they processed the day's events. Throughout these deliberations, Naruto found himself increasingly aware of a subtle shift in their group dynamic, a deep Ning cohesion forged through shared crisis and successful cooperation under extreme pressure. Particularly notable was Caulifla's protective stance toward the refugees, her natural leadership quality emerging more prominently as she advocated for their immediate needs and long-term integration. Where once she had focused almost exclusively on combat and personal strength, she now demonstrated unexpected depth in organizational planning and community support strategies. Kale, too, showed remarkable growth, offering thoughtful analysis during strategic discussions and confidently managing communication between refugee groups and their administrative team. Her shy hesitance had transformed into quiet competence, her contributions valued not merely as extensions of Caulifla's initiatives but as independent insights reflecting her unique perspective. As their meeting concluded well past midnight, Naruto found himself walking alone along the island's perimeter, processing the day's events and their implications for both the restoration project and his personal journey. The momentary glimpse of Konoha through the spontaneous tear had reawakened complex emotions regarding his eventual return home, a possibility that seemed simultaneously more tangible and more complicated than before. "Can't sleep either," came Caulifla's voice as she approached along the shoreline, her typically picky hair softened by the gentle night breeze. "Too much to think about," Naruto admitted, welcoming her company. 300 refugees to integrate, mysterious time manipulators to identify, universal restoration to continue. And somewhere in there, figuring out what happens when all this is done. Caulifla nodded, understanding the unspoken complexity behind his words. "You mean whether you go back to your village or stay in the universe you've helped rebuild?" Among other things, he agreed, appreciating her directness. "Seeing Konoha today, even briefly, it reminded me of responsibilities and connections there. People who depend on me, care about me, and you have none of those here, of course," Caulifla remarked with uncharacteristic gentleness despite the sarcastic words. "No universe full of people calling you their golden healer. No team of dedicated allies working alongside you. No personal connections worth considering." The last phrase carried weight beyond its simple wording, an acknowledgement of developing relationships that transcended mere professional cooperation. Naruto turned to face her directly, finding unusual vulnerability in her expression despite her characteristic confident posture. "Those connections matter deeply," he assured her sincerely. "More than I probably show sometimes, caught up in the technical aspects of what we're doing." "You don't need to explain," Caulifla said, shrugging with deliberate casualness that didn't quite mask the importance of the conversation to her. "Duty, responsibility, complicated choices, I get it. Saiyans understand loyalty conflicts." Quote, "It's not just duty," Naruto clarified, wanting her to understand. "It's about finding balance between different parts of who I am. Hokage, restoration catalyst, friend, teacher. Figuring out how those identities coexist when the immediate crisis passes." Caulifla studied him for a long moment, the moonlight reflecting in her eyes. Maybe they don't have to be separate. Maybe there's a way to be all those things without sacrificing any of them. What do you mean? He asked, intrigued by her perspective. The dimensional tears, she explained, gesturing toward the stars that represented their creation seeds. If we can stabilize them, control them, maybe they become bridges rather than barriers. Ways to connect worlds rather than choose between them. The possibility was both hopeful and profound. Not an either or choice between his original home and this new universe he'd helped create, but potentially a both and solution that maintain connections across dimensional boundaries. That's actually brilliant, Naruto acknowledged, genuine admiration in his voice. Caulifla smirked, though the expression held warmth rather than arrogance. Don't sound so surprised. I have good ideas occasionally. More than occasionally, he corrected sincerely. Your leadership during the evacuation today was impressive. You have natural talent for organization and people management that goes way beyond fighting ability. This genuine praise seemed to briefly disarm her usual defenses. Yeah, well, someone had to make sure those refugees didn't end up wandering around confused after you heroically saved them from dimensional collapse. Her deflection didn't disguise the significance of what had occurred, Caulifla discovering aspects of her capabilities beyond combat prowess, developing leadership dimensions that complemented rather than replaced her warrior identity. As they continued walking along the shoreline, their conversation drifted to more immediate concerns: integration plans for the refugees, security protocols given the mysterious temporal manipulator, and continuing restoration priorities. Throughout this practical discussion, something had shifted subtly between them, a deepening of trust and mutual respect that created foundation for whatever might develop next in their complex relationship. When they eventually parted ways to seek much-needed rest, Naruto found himself reflecting on how dramatically circumstances had evolved since his arrival in the void. What had begun as desperate survival alongside suspicious strangers had transformed into profound partnership with people he now considered essential to his life, connections that would factor significantly into whatever decisions awaited regarding his ultimate place in the cosmos. 3 days after the refugee rescue operation, Hitomi made a discovery in the archives that dramatically changed their understanding of recent events. During route, in cataloging of historical references to dimensional phenomena, she encountered an ancient section containing prophecies and predictions from long-extinct Universe 6 civilizations. This requires immediate attention, she announced, entering the command center where Naruto and Kale were reviewing expansion data from the Creation Seed Network. Her typically measured movements showed unusual urgency as her archive floated beside her, pages turning rapidly to specific sections she had marked. "What have you found?" Naruto asked, immediately recognizing the significance of her demeanor. Oracle documentation predating the current universal cycle by approximately 73.4 million years, Hitomi replied, placing her archive on the central table where relevant pages displayed themselves prominently. Specifically, predictive chronicles from the Chronos civilization that inhabited the galactic core region during Universe 6, a previous iteration. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.